This is Dan Schneider, and I'm talking with a young fellow named Destin Davis, who is actually going to be using this video script for. Whoops, he just went down. Oh, there he is. Okay, is actually going to be using this video script for an interview. What paper do you work for again?
I work at the Saline Courier in Benton, Arkansas.
Benton,
It's
Arkansas.
Central Arkansas. It's a suburb of Little Rock,
Okay.
and we cover the county. The county is Saline County.
So, but just let me ask a couple questions, and then I'll turn it over to you to questions. So, is your goal to be a journalist? Because you did send me a screenplay. So, do you consider yourself more a creative writer or a journalistic writer?
I mean, traditionally, I am a journalist, and I went to school. Well, I did major in journalism. Actually, when I went to college, I majored in political science and history. I did a few political internships and had a political job after I graduated, and I hated that. I was miserable. So
So
after that,
what are you politically? Because I'm an independent. I vote third party.
yeah, I would say I'm an independent. I would say I definitely lean to the left, though. But I was raised kind of right wing. So when I was in college and even in high school, when I was doing these internships in Arkansas, every elected official is a Republican. The county I live in, every partisan elected spot is a Republican. So all the internships I had in college were with Republicans because I would intern for like the congressman from Arkansas or a senator from Arkansas, and then and that was in D.C. And then I worked on a campaign and for one of them, and I just hated it. I was miserable. I was literally a leftist working in Republican politics, and
Well, see,
I was miserable and had to get out.
I I was my dad was a Democrat in New York City. Over the years, though, to me, I think Democrats are an evil right wing party, and the Republicans are psychotic
Yeah,
fascists.
they're off the grid.
And the thing is, if you look at like most political issues, whether it's gay rights, whether it's abortion rights, whether it's UBI, whether it's anything, the forgiveness of college debt.
That'd be a nice one right now.
Most people, there's something like a 60% minimum support for that around the country, across the
Yes.
country, and yet why do we end up with people like Biden and Trump? It's because of the money.
And
Where are actual left wing politicians? These people who run as Democrat. Bernie Sanders would be considered right of center in fucking
yeah,
Europe. And
yeah,
I didn't like Sanders because I knew he was a
yeah,
phony. I knew he didn't have the balls.
yeah,
He for example, you probably know he won every single county in West Virginia, but the Democrats gave the state to Hillary in 2016.
yeah.
It was a total fix. So when some
Uh-huh.
asshole like Trump talks about fixed elections, in some instances he's true. He's a
Yeah,
beneficiary of that every bit as much
yeah.
as Hillary Clinton.
Oh, he wouldn't have been. Look, I think it goes back to, you're talking about parties, and the Democrats, they're basically, a right wing neoliberal party, and the Republicans, I agree, are off the grid, and about half of them are even fascists now. I would say, which a lot of people get mad if you say that, but I think it's just the truth. If you look at the rhetoric and the way they talk and look at their issues, like for example, here in Saline County, one of the main issues I had to write about last year was there was a lot of people who would come to the quorum court meetings and talk about books they want taken out of the library. And for 2 hours, they'd stand up and read from these books that would be about, a gay kid or a black kid, and they would say this teaches people to hate white people, or this teaches, teaches kids to be gay. Even they would call people who supported these books groomers. I think I heard one guy equate in the same sentence pedophile, groomer, socialist, and communist at one point. He used all those lines describing the people who support, not censoring libraries.
Well, another thing that gets me is I try to not be that political when I'm talking about when I'm doing these kinds of interviews. But for
Yeah.
example, a few years ago, this website called Quora, solicited me to
Oh, yeah.
write answers for shit. So I never seen them before. But I've done it, and I'm constantly getting into arguments with people about the Israel Palestine
Oh
shit,
man.
and I'm definitely pro Palestine. I'm not pro Hamas, but
Yeah.
to me,
Same.
Israel is the last colonial state left around. And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, they talk about like, oh, 6 million, never again, whatnot. And that's the biggest lie in history. How many fucking genocides have there been in the last 80 years since the end
Oh
of
man.
World War II? And no
Oh
one
man.
does a thing. The
Yeah.
world doesn't police it. We don't care. And even putting that aside,
Unless there's something there. Unless there's something there that we might, a
well,
power
yeah,
vacuum or a
but but
oil.
but even that, it's interesting. And here's an interesting fact you should look up. Since 1946, the first full year after the Second World War, in every single calendar year, as far as I know, up until 2022, I don't know if 2023 stats are already
Right.
in the book, more people die and get injured permanently at work than in all the wars in all those years combined. So if you went to 1953, more people around the world get killed and get injured to the point they can't work anymore, not as soldiers, but as
Yeah.
workers. And people
Yeah.
overlook that. And here in the U.S., countries that we conquered, like Japan and Germany, have stronger unions than this
Right.
fucking country. And
Yeah.
every single president since the 1970s, and I put most of the blame on Ronald Reagan. People talk, Trump is a piece of shit, the Bushes were pieces of shit. I didn't like Bill Clinton. I don't, and I regret my 2 votes for Obama. I voted for Ralph Nader 3 times. I voted in 2016 for the Green Party. I voted socialist
Okay.
in 2020. But ever since then, they have screwed the working class, and
Right.
it's fucking ridiculous. And I mean,
So
yeah.
I think I read Tumbleweeds, and I think one of the things I really liked about Tumbleweeds is how well you depicted that screwing of the working class. And I think the Manny Cole character is your doppelganger, and his father in the book is works at the post office, and he's a union guy. And
he actually drove a medical van for the New York City health department, and that's the same in the book, I believe.
Okay. Well, in the book, I thought he worked for the post office.
Maybe I did change that. I know in my true life memoirs, maybe I did.
Yeah.
It's been almost. It's been 2011 since I wrote, and people
Yeah.
say, "How do you not remember this stuff?" I said, "You know how much I fucking write."
Yeah.
People.
I want to get into that at some point.
I'll get interviews where people will say, back in 2003, you wrote this thing about Tom Cruise or something, and then I saw someone you says that it was one of the better performances. And I'm like, well, yeah, you put it on. Tom Cruise is a terrible actor. If he gives a passable performance, it's not a good performance. But people.
What about Magnolia?
That was an okay movie. I mean, I think
what about his performance?
I didn't think that was particularly good. The two performances that I think are passable of his are Eyes Wide Shut, where he basically plays a mall zombie, which is what he is.
Great,
seemingly.
Eyes Wide Shut.
And then the other
Awesome
one
film.
was the Spielberg one, Minority Report, where he's actually.
See, I don't like Minority Report. It's like
Well, I think the first 3/4 of it is a good solid sci-fi film. The last 25% goes in the toilet.
I think just like it gets a little like when he walks into the room, he's doing all this stuff with the tech. It looks like Spielberg just got a little overzealous with the special effects in some of those scenes, and I just, to me, it kind of took away from a great story.
The thing though, that's a Philip K. Dick story, I think.
Right.
And the thing is, every Philip K. Dick adaptation that you watch is better than the Dick story. Because Philip K. Dick had no understanding of the human condition. He wrote
Do Androids Dream of Sheep, right?
The
Blade Runner books. He wrote the Blade Runner books.
Philip K. Dick, did he write Blade Runner? Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Yeah, I've read that.
The Android Dream of Electric Sheep.
You're right.
I mean,
it's not as good as the film.
Someone like Harlan Ellison, both of them as sci-fi writers were better. They were idea people. They didn't have any. And for me, one of the things with characters is you have to get behind the character's eyes, because all character is plot is character.
Right.
If you read Moby Dick and you're entranced by it, you're not giving a fuck about the whale. It's about the people on the Pequod. And I don't mean to. I'm not looking to slam it. But one of the things with your screenplay that I found that was not good was all of the characters seemed to be very bland, and I've seen them before. The mother. There were a lot of scenes where the mother of one of the boys, was it Allison is her name?
Annabelle.
And she's like, fuck. I was just watching a video.
Yeah.
I was just watching a
Great
video.
advice, by the way. I'm rewriting the script right now, and I'm taking out so many fucks.
Well, but the thing is, I what it reminded me of, and I mentioned it, the old No Country for Old Men, and that whole kind of Coen Brothers kind of thing. This actually, the mother could be a very Erin Brockovich type character in trying to find the stuff, but she became a stereotype very early on, and I think if you're gonna have the scene with the boys, that was actually not a badly written scene, but you don't put that right up front. What if you have the mother digging for the truth? At some point, 90% in should come the revelation of what happened, and how she gets it, I don't know.
So I've been rewriting of some of your advice. I think I wrote a little bit. What am I at right now? I'm at 19 pages, and I took your advice, and I just wanted to try without that opening scene with the boys.
Yeah.
And so I tried, and I opened with the train right now, and I show a little bit more of the police arriving after it happened. And I show a little bit more of the crime scene, essentially, after it happens.
And I remember you asked in the email, there's 4 or 5 scenes at the end of the film or the screenplay that come after the revelation. And I'm sorry, but I forget what actually happens in the last.
That's fine. Yeah.
In the thing, but I think one of the things that you need to do is you have just one scene after the climax where they're coming together. There's a I was talking about this I do this series of TV shows and the history of TV with a fellow the last year. We were talking about The Fugitive, not the movie, but the 1963 TV series, and that ends very powerfully. If you have the Criterion Channel or you have something, you can watch the last episode of that. Watch out, because this is a 4-year series. It was the highest rated show in the history of television.
I know The Fugitive. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I think if you end with a powerful, maybe 90-second to 2-minute long scene, boom, because you don't. One of the things that with any fiction, you don't want to give away too much. Only give what is necessary, unless you have unless a character is just naturally chatty. I just watched this film called Portrait of Jason from 1967. It's a black and white film from Shirley Clark, this documentary filmmaker. It's about this gay black guy who just goes on and on for almost 2 hours talking. And the first half hour is okay. The rest of it gets over repetitive because he's not really creative. He's a poseur, and so it ruins that way. But
I'm surprised it didn't come out this year, is the way you're describing it.
What? Oh,
I said I'm surprised it didn't come out this year the way you're describing it.
But so there are things, and this just came to mind. Even though yours is a screenplay, one of the ways, if you have in a bookstore and you're thumbing through books and you want to know if this is a book worth buying, look at the last page and the first page of the chapter ending and the chapter openings. If you're not given a good ending, something that makes you go off, and if you're not grabbed in the first, you have to have like super glue holding these things together. Because someone once said, I think it was a filmmaker, I think it was what's his name, the guy who did The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, John Huston. I think John Huston once said,
that's one of my favorite films, by the way.
I think John Huston once said, a great film, you need to have 5 or 6 great scenes, and then just everything else can be average. You have a great film. And in a sense, he's right. But anyway,
what do you think about The Treasure of Sierra Madre?
I think it's a good, solid film. I'm not a big Bogey fan. I'm much more of a James Cagney guy.
Okay. I feel like it's one of Bogey's better performances, though.
It is.
And Houston's dad is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, John Huston himself. If you really want to see a fucking great performance, one of the best on-screen acting performances by John Huston. Watch The Other Side of the Wind, the Orson Welles film.
The Netflix one. That that was good. Yeah, I watched it. That was good.
I mean, and the thing is, and I've told all the people in the Cosmoetica circle, I said, the thing about this, you watch that film, it is so fundamentally different than what he did 30 years before with Citizen Kane. He in the 1970s, he's doing 21st century filmmaking in the 1970s. There, the most quick cutting is just bullshit. Sucks if you look at the Michael Bay's, the action stuff. But here, he's cutting 2 or 3 seconds for reactions. You get characters that maybe only have 60 to 80 seconds on screen, but in the 4 or 5 scenes, they make one little comment or something that sets the Houston character off, and you understand their relationship. And I have to say, I don't think there's any film. I could make a good argument that Orson Welles is the greatest filmmaker of all time, not because of Citizen Kane, not because of Kane, but if you go from the 60s or 70s, have you ever seen, for example, Chimes of Midnight? He takes a Falstaff, one of the lesser Shakespeare characters.
And
Wells understands Shakespeare more than Shakespeare did, because I can tell you, while I think Shakespeare is certainly a great writer, he's not the greatest writer in the English language.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I would agree. That's fair. Othello's another great one. I love Orson Welles.
Yes,
Othello.
but even that one, while it's radical, is not as radical as what he does in Chimes at Midnight. Not as radical as what he does with the one with the magic stuff. And then I'm hoping. I'm hearing things online that in the next few years that they have like 85-90% of the Don Quixote film that he made that they could put together, because if that's as good as those 2 films, Chimes at Midnight and Other Side of the Wind, I mean, what he could do, and even something like Mr. Arkadin in the 50s, with the limited budget,
the final version, not the not the original cut, the final cut is the restored version, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, he did more for the art form than anyone else. And Kubrick, Kurosawa are phenomenal filmmakers in their own right.
Absolutely.
But both of them had carte blanche. They could do whatever they wanted. Yeah. This guy, Wells, after the first film, had to go sucking dick for the last 40 years of his career as an artist just to make these films. And if you look at like Chimes at Midnight at the low budget, the scene, is it the Battle of Agincourt that it is? I forget. But the scene there is shot at eye level with handheld cameras.
The battle scene in that film.
I mean,
absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
and so ahead of its time. And
and so I mean, there are great filmmakers. Woody Allen in his 15-year run from 77 to 92.
I just rewatched, as you said, Woody Allen. I rewatched Hannah and Her Sisters recently. That's a great film.
Cassavetes was great.
I like Cassavetes.
Kubrick was great, and there's 2 or 3 other ones. But in reality, there's Wells and there's everyone else. At least. Definitively within the American film, Wells is the greatest American filmmaker, period. Kubrick is nipping on his heels.
Where do you have Scorsese?
The early stuff, like Woody Allen, the last 30 years, he's been repeating himself, just doing shit. I saw bits
I think his newest film is one of his best in a while.
Which one? What?
Killers of the Flower Moon came out last year.
I haven't seen that. The last one that if you look at a lot of the guys from the 80s, another one, Oliver Stone, in the 80s and 90s, he was killing it. And then it just went in the tank. He did that football movie, and
that one's terrible. And I'm not even as big on some of his earlier films. He made did he make Platoon?
Yeah, I'm not big on Platoon. It's a good, solid movie, but it doesn't.
Do you like JFK?
JFK is I think a great film, but The best one I would say, well, the three big ones, his three best films are JFK, Nixon, and The Doors.
Okay, I have seen The Doors. I haven't seen Nixon. I would agree The Doors is a great film. JFK, I haven't seen it in long enough. I watched that when I was really young. I was
And
probably about
if
13
you
years
like The
old. I went
Doors,
to, you live in Texas, right?
yeah.
So I'm sure you've been to where JFK was shot.
No, I
You've
haven't.
never
I've
been.
been in Dallas, but I mean,
Yeah,
uh,
it's a cool spot, really cool museum. I went there when I was young, and after that, I like went on a freaking tear.
if you watch and enjoy The Doors, Val Kilmer's performance, a film he did with Vincent D'Onofrio, The Salton Sea from the late
Oh, I haven't
'90s
seen that.
or early O's. That's an excellent film. Another
Yeah.
one you should watch is The Limey. It's the best film by Soderbergh. It's a phenomenal performance by Terrence Stamp as
Okay.
as anyway, but we're getting too far afield.
No, we're fine.
No?
I love this stuff. This is fun. So like, yeah. When do you think Scorsese tailed off? What was his
Um,
last great film, in your opinion?
Unequivocally great film. I'd say probably Goodfellas.
That's fair.
Then a lot of people nowadays are talking about the film he did from the 1890s with Daniel Day Lewis.
Oh, Gang of New York. No, that's not a great film. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's not a great
it's
film.
okay. Casino has a few moments. Then he gets into when he went with Leonardo DiCaprio. DiCaprio is a better actor than Tom Cruise, but that's about it. I mean, to me, he's just a joke. I mean, he looked in most of those films. He still looks like a little boy. Who in their right mind is going to be scared if Leonardo DiCaprio says, I'm gonna kick your ass"? I
You
mean,
didn't like him as Howard Hawks, or not Howard Hawks,
Howard
Howard
Hughes.
Hughes.
No,
Howard
I mean
Hughes.
it's a very self-indulgent movie.
The
Scorsese,
editing of that film is so good, though. Like, I feel like some of the editing in that film is like some of the best editing.
well, you can talk about the
No, and
technical
I'm not
this
saying
or
it's a
that.
great film. I'm just saying there's aspects of that movie that
The
are
the problem with
still better than most of the movies that
the
come out.
problem with Scorsese is that he's gotten to that he can do anything. If you look at his early stuff, uh, what's the first one from '73, the gangster.
Mean Streets.
Mean Streets, I'm sorry. Yeah, if you look at Mean Streets, low budget. If you look at Taxi Driver, didn't have a big budget. They forced him to make interesting choices. You look at something like, Raging Bull was his first, I think, big budget film. Then he went back.
That's yeah.
The
I think
King of
that's his
the
best
King
film.
of Comedy, low budget. The one with
Great
the
film.
guy who's out all night, the comedy.
After Hours.
After Hours.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a terrific film. Then he did the Last Temptation of Christ, and he did the Tom Cruise movie with
Yeah. Color of Money.
they were bloated and weren't that good. He went
Yeah.
back. He did Goodfellas, and to me, that's the last unequivocally great film. And
But
he,
still, I think that's 20 years of like great films. So I think he has an argument to be the greatest American filmmaker based off that catalog from.
well, that's
when,
like
I mean,
that's
you go like Mean Streets, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Taxi Driver.
well, Woody
Raging
Allen has
Bull.
more great films, and from
You think-
'77
oh,
to Annie
you
Hall
think
to
so?
'92, just numerically. But
Yeah.
again,
I feel like he was kind of.
you,
I
you,
don't
you
know.
have to
Yeah,
look.
go
You
ahead.
have to look at certain things. Getting more from less. If you're able to, like Wells, on a 50,000 budget strung out over 7 or
Right.
8 years,
Yeah.
make a great film. That's more impressive. I'm sorry, that's more
fair.
impressive than Scorsese getting a $150 million budget to make some bullshit pseudo epic that he wants to make. And you look at Cassavetes. If Wells is the grandfather of independent American cinema, the father is Cassavetes. And
What about Bogdanovich?
I mean, he had a few good. I mean, here and there, but the last what is it called, the black and white film in Texas, the last I forget the name of it.
Black and White and is that the Last Picture Show?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No?
That's
Oh, okay.
that's Bogdanovich, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean that's got some potential here or there, but I mean he's not in a league with that. I
I
mean
like Paper Moon. I'm not saying he's in a league, but I do think he had a lot of influence
Paper Moon
on
was I
those.
remember that as a kid, but I haven't watched it for 45,
Yeah, I think
50
that's a
years.
great film. I think he had a lot of influence on those guys, that came out of the set that American, what do they call it, the New
New Hollywood,
Hollywood, what do they call that era?
New
I
Hollywood.
think he had a lot of influence on that in the same way Cassavetes did with films like Faces and Shadows and Bogdanovich. Uh, he was like, he was close with Wells, and he was kind of really helpful to guys like Scorsese and Coppola in the 70s.
Yeah, and I put him in the same league as Schrader as a director. You know,
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
someone
That's
who
fair.
has some idea, but they're not really directors in my mind.
Yeah.
They're more Bogdanovich's importance in American film is going to basically be as a film historian and preservationist.
Right.
Scorsese does that too, but Scorsese has more great
Yeah.
films. He's someone who innovated, you know. And then there are people that you know. Have you ever seen like the short experimental films of Maya Deren? It's a
Uh-uh.
yeah. I did an interview with a couple of gals 2 or 3 years ago. She's one of these few. She's one of the few what you'd call experimental filmmakers that actually had some talent. She only did about
Okay.
7 or 8 films. I mean, her total output is probably less than 3 hours on screen because she did 15,
Wow.
20 minute films. But you know,
Is there a where can you watch it?
yeah, YouTube, Maya Deren,
Oh, okay.
Maya Deren, Deren. And if not
Yeah.
there, if you have the Criterion channel, they
Yeah.
probably have that. Um, uh, and if you just Google my name, you can probably find the
The
article or
interview.
the show I did with these two women talking about it. But that's one of the problems with art too is I'm going to be experimental. Let me give you an example. These two guys I know, Alex Sheremit and Joel Parrish, are doing this documentary film on a friend of mine who died in 22, Bruce Ario. He was a poet who had mental illness, addictions, a lot of.
I've heard you talk about him in a video before.
Yeah, so we're trying to get this film made and send around. So I've been sending around, like I sent around to over 50 just poetry professors an hour or so ago. I've been sending around to YouTube channels interested in poetry, to podcasts and whatnot, and very
Yeah.
few people respond. And I knew it would be this way because people don't really care about the arts. People will talk about it, but they
Yeah.
won't take the actual action. And God forbid you actually want to make good art or great art. People don't want to care about it. They just want, will it make money? This is again the sickness that
How it
infests
is.
this country's whole ethos, and it's really at its worst when you're talking about the arts. Sure, it would be nice, for example, like, if you work on your screenplay and someone wants to produce it or whatnot, that's good. But is it just to make money, or do you want to do something
No,
that
I want it
Cassavetes
to
might
be
have
good.
done?
That's why I sent it to you.
Yeah,
I think I've talked to people. This Boys on the Track story is pretty infamous here in Arkansas.
uh-huh.
There's a lot of interest in it. There's a bit of book written about it. I actually interviewed the lady who wrote the book for about an hour, and so I fictionalized it in
Uh-huh.
my screenplay. So I think there's plenty of interest in she said there's been people who wanted to adapt her book, but their scripts were terrible, and I wouldn't want to adapt the book just because the book has no ending.
Uh-huh.
So I think I could shop it around, but I want it to be good before I shop it around. I don't want it to just be
And
140 pages of.
I
And it's
there's
the
a
first fine. That's the first full thing I've ever written.
uh-huh.
Besides short stories
Uh-huh.
and articles for the newspaper. First full creative project I've ever written.
There's a Finnish filmmaker named Dome Karakaski, and he's the son of a guy I knew named George Dickinson, an actor and a writer. George died almost a decade ago in 15 or 16, and his son George actually wrote a terrific screenplay about his time in Lebanon in the 1970s as a reporter. And yet his son has no interest in producing it. So it's like, I don't understand if you have something of quality and you have a connection to it or whatnot, why wouldn't you do this? These people I email about this poet Bruce Ario, in the book, his selected poems, I mean, I go and compare him and rank him among the top 10, 15 English language poets of all time.
Okay.
When he's got a novel that he wrote and he had a lot of mental ills, I go back and I restored changes made by this subsidy press that he tried publishing with a decade ago, and just terrible things. And I say this is the kind of thing that bad publishers, bad artists do. They fuck up the works of other people. And I'll argue that I'm a great writer, a great poet. I'll argue that my books or my poems are great. I'll argue about this fellow Bruce being a great poet. Most people don't want to even argue the point of excellence. What is the point of anything? Why are you a critic, for example, if you're not going to say this is worth your time watching or reading or not? That's the very purpose. Don't give me this bullshit social criticism. Well, it's a terribly made film, but it deals with this issue. This is what another thing too. If you've ever noticed, you've gone on works or websites of writers, they'll say this writer deals with so and so. Who cares what they deal with? How do they deal with it? Do they deal with it well, or is it just if all I'm saying is racism is bad? That's not a.
Did you see Get Out? Did you see Get Out?
What?
Did you see Get Out, the movie Get Out?
No. What?
Oh, it got a tons of movie is held. People think it's one of the best screenplays ever. Like you look up the list, and it'll be on the list of like best screenplays of all time, and it's just because it's a movie about a topical social issue, racism, and I think it's a fine movie, but it's nowhere near a great movie. But it is.
It sounds like that movie Crash from 20 years ago.
Oh my God.
And
that won Best Picture, didn't it?
Yeah, and it won it over Brokeback Mountain, which was an equally bad film.
Yeah,
that was a film written by a woman who never met a male homosexual, apparently.
There was a film, golly, there's so many, but that gets me on to something I want to talk about is why do you think so much great work goes unpublished? And when was the last time? Go ahead. Because
the people who are in the positions to publish don't know what's good or bad. Just like I work in a supermarket, for example. The company that I work for, I won't name it, is terribly run. Everyone knows it's terribly run. Everyone is miserable because they hire and promote. Have you ever heard of the Peter Principle?
Yeah.
That what applies to corporate America applies to the arts. You have people who. I'll give you another example. Just a few days ago, I mentioned this fellow Alex Sherman who's doing this film. He has an ex-girlfriend who's one of these politically correct people. Apparently, she went to an online university and got a PhD or something and is calling herself Dr. So-and-so. And you know what she got a PhD in? Can you guess?
Gender studies?
No.
Okay. Gender identity?
No.
Sexual identity?
Even more inane.
Oh, I can't. Then just tell me.
She's a PhD in empathy.
What?
Yes.
That's not a real. Is that accredited? There's no way that's accredited.
She's a doctor of empathy. She's empathic. I thought that was something that happened in Star Trek. That the Star Trek Next Generation, the one who's the Marina Sirtis, the actor, plays an empath. I mean, this is the kind of degraded, dumbed down shit. And no one's saying I'm all for being empathetic towards this, that, or the other thing.
Absolutely.
But it's not anything you can study, and this is what happens in the arts too. Is this person wrote a poem about this, that, or the other thing, and I agree with its sentiments, but agreeing with sentiments, there's a difference between liking something
Mhm.
or not liking it and understanding its quality. To put, and I don't know, I'm assuming you're heterosexual.
Yes.
Okay, so you probably, for example, seen women who you wanted to just fucking ball after 5 minutes in the room with them. You thought they were gorgeous or whatnot, but after that 5 minutes, you find out they're an airhead or they're a bigot or they're this, and you're like, oh, okay. On the other hand, you might have been in a room and you see, some shy little wallflower, and then you end up being introduced to her by a friend. You talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and you're like, wow, she's really smart. She suddenly gets
Yeah.
more into. So there's this mindset that if you like something, it's good. No,
Right.
there are plenty of things that
Agreed.
I know are great that I don't particularly like. Ingmar Bergman films, I'm not particularly drawn to them. I don't particularly like them. But if you watch a film like Persona and don't think it's a great film, you've got no business being a film critic.
Right.
Similarly, I love, for example, some of the bad Ed Wood films, the bad Godzilla films from the 60s. I grew up
Yeah.
on them. But I don't mistake them for real great cinema. And
Yeah.
that's the difference that people can't wrap their heads around. You can, and they also personalize a lot of things. Because, for example, if when I wrote you back an email about your screenplay, if you were like, "You're a fucking asshole, I hate you, fuck you," boom, that tells me that you wouldn't be serious about your art or your craft.
Right.
And this, though, is what 95% of the people are like. I've run poetry groups. I've been in poetry groups. I've engaged in the arts for 40 years now, online and off. I mean, I have literally gotten sent to me probably over 1 million poems, 250,000 poem submissions. Some of them I haven't read simply because they're people who were bad, and this is the 715th time they've emailed me their crap, and I'm like, but yeah, these people don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Or if they do know, they have sold out. And I don't know which is worse, to be totally ignorant or to know something is wrong or whatnot, and yet go along with it for your own personal benefit. We're all mortal. When I'm dead and in the ground, the people who know me will know this guy was focused. He had a set of ethics that he followed by. I'll give you an example. When I was sending around for the Bruce Ariel film just recently, this guy who has a fairly popular YouTube channel, probably gets about 15,000 views for his takes on books or poetry or whatnot. So I sent it to him, forwarded on his reply to Alex and Joel, the guys, the filmmakers, and he's basically asking to pay for him to review it. And I'm like, that is so fucking unethical. That's as unethical as a subsidy press where writers have to pay. If you're doing this, but this is what happens with things like these YouTube channels is they're all chasing the algorithm. So if they get one fucking video that gets 500,000 hits and they're averaging 5 or 10,000, they try to repeat and they dumb down. This is again the corrosive effect of what money can do to things. I'm not someone against money per se, but when you put money into things and money becomes the priority, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in civil service, whether it's in whatever field it is, science, you're going to get corrupted. And people and you see this in science papers too. In order to get funding for their departments, scientists have been known to tweak a little figures here or there. And when they do that, that feeds the asshole right-wing bastards who are going to be like, oh, well, see, this asshole at Stanford University put false figures into 17 documents over a 20-year period. Therefore, there's no global warming.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, and it sucks. And, you talked about Bergman. What you said you don't necessarily like some of his. What were some of his films you'd say you do like?
Winter Light, I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I like that movie, but it's also a great film. It's a very, what is the term they used to call that film? It's very much not a platonic is platonic. It's not a platonic dialogue, but it's something that resonates with me. Persona, I didn't particularly like Persona.
Okay.
I didn't like his last film that won the Academy Award in '82.
Is that Fanny? Was
Yeah,
Fanny
Fanny
his
and
last
Alexander.
film? Yeah.
That is arguably a great film, but I didn't particularly like.
Too long. I like it, though.
I did like Scenes from a Marriage.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not a big fan of The Seventh Seal. I did like Wild Strawberries. So there are
Yeah.
films because The Seventh Seal is so heavy-handed with its symbolism. I'm not
Right.
saying that it doesn't have some great qualities, but it's not
Yeah.
up there with Wild Strawberries.
Or my favorite's Persona. I think I like Persona. I like Shame,
Yeah,
the war film. I like what is I saw Sawdust and Tinsel recently. That's like pure
that's a
expressionism.
terrific
That's
one.
a great film.
Yeah, that's one of his early ones, the pre-Wild Strawberries. It was great. The other one, there's another. Summer with Monica has some interesting stuff. So
Yeah, it does.
it's it's one of those things. Now with for example, I love Yasujiro Ozu. Ozu's also a
Yeah.
great filmmaker, but
For sure.
there's something that resonates within me. And if you've seen on like some of my Cosmoetica stuff, you'll see I have an Oriental symbol in black and blue. That's the letter mu, which means nothingness. And there's a famous saying. Well, I think it's on Ozu's tombstone. It says he's got just that symbol, which basically means he came from nothing, he returned to nothingness. And for example,
Yeah.
like I'm not religious. I don't believe in an afterlife. I think we are patterns more than we are beings. We're constantly changing here and there as we age.
Yeah.
Now I'm declining as I'm 59. You're in your mid-20s, I guess. You're still in the ascent of your life. So
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully it goes well. We'll see what happens. So you're 59. Let's talk a little bit about your work now, because that's what I'm going to write about is your work. What I want to focus my story on is I want to write about your work, why it's great, and we've already talked about the reason stuff like that goes unpublished. I want to talk a little bit about like your efforts to get stuff published. I think you're a great writer. I think based on your output, you might strong argument you're the best living writer. So how is it that someone like you, how does a novel like Tumbleweeds or the Machete Brothers go unpublished?
it's just what I've been talking about.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
People don't understand what.
But do people read it? Did people read those books?
I mean, I'm people like you. Probably once or twice a year. I mean, I probably get a dozen or so people who will email me now. It used to be a lot more, but I get a dozen people that will want to read stuff. So maybe once a month I'll send it out to someone like you, and maybe you might know someone or someone who knows someone that might be interested, who runs a small press or something. But I mean, Jessica and I have probably sent out our writings, and Jessica, I think, is the greatest female writer that's ever lived, at least in the English language.
I haven't read much of her, but I need to.
Yeah, but she, you send them out, they're not interested. There was one, and sometimes you get these nasty, snarky kind of things. One guy Jessica always talks about was like, said something like, he gave the usual 3 or 4 paragraph bullshit, and then he wrote something like, that I was being arrogant by saying whatever book I had sent was a great book. But quality, quantity, and diversity are the 3 things you need in great art. You need to get to a certain level of quality. But what happens with a lot of people who do that is they just repeat themselves. Imagine doing nothing but great love sonnets. If you've ever heard of a poet named Pablo Neruda from Peru, he wrote great love poems. Like most Latin Americans, his political poetry is absolute shit. Then you need quantity, because someone like Bruce Ariel, for example, wrote a lot of great poems, but he for every great poem he wrote 20 pieces of doggerel, which is bad poetry. If you've only got one or two things that are great in a long career, it's a dart toss. You know,
Okay.
I'm not. You don't have to be a great dart thrower. That you know, if you
Okay.
blindfolded me, spun me around 1,000 times, I'd still get a handful of you know, center tosses or whatever they call it,
Yeah.
bullseyes. Um, and then after quality and quantity, you need diversity. You don't just want to write great poems that are love sonnets. You don't just want to write this form or that form, or just write angry young man beatnik type poetry. You don't. If you're
Mm.
writing a novel, for example, if I look through, if I just go back in my mind, uh, I've written books that are portraits of individuals. I've written a Norwegian in the Family is almost 2.5 million words.
I haven't read that one yet,
Yeah,
but
the Vincetti Brothers is over 600,000 words, so it's significantly longer than War and Peace. Um,
yeah.
then and what I did in those two books, I had a thing called Total Immersion, where I
Hmm.
have these long dialogue scenes between characters that the characters are talking not necessarily about what they seem to be talking about, but they're talking around certain things.
Kind of like in a great film is the way, like, is what it reminds me of.
Yeah, like in a Cassavetes film, you know, when
Yeah.
he's going for that realism. But now I don't really do much of that. For example, I I did my last completed novel. I did a book on the actress, what's her name, Tallulah Bankhead. I don't know if from the 30s, 40s.
I don't remember.
Before that, I
Ring a
did a
bell.
book called a novel called Center of Mass, which I wanted to do a World War II novel. I have a number of great World War II scenes in Vincetti Brothers and Norwegian in the
And you have
Family.
some great sonnets too. War sonnets I've read. Uh,
Who, me?
and from your American sonnets,
Oh,
yeah.
well, yeah, and
The
so
MacArthur one, I think, was that.
that,
Was
that
that
that's
was
not
that
that's not a
you?
sonnet. That's like a 3-page long poem.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. That one, that one was really good.
But 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 anyway, what I was saying, diversity. You don't just want to keep repeating yourself. You have to keep churning. You have to, you know, one of the and here's another thing, a great point, everyone. One of the most valuable things in being a great artist is to forget, because if
Yeah,
you have to remember the general principles of what makes this art or a particular art form great, but you don't want to remember the same things over and over again, because you don't want to be writing the same kind of novel over and over again. I
right.
before I the Center of Mass that I did three or so novels ago was about the 40-year aftermath of people after World War II, and basically about not just post traumatic stress disorder, but how everyone comes down from that, and how the war ruins lives years after they're going. And
Yeah.
that's about a 350,000 word novel. It's a long novel. But in between them, I did a kid's book called Baby and Buddy. I have my orange cat Kabiria. I call her Baby. And one night I see she's looking out the marble cubes that we have in our bathroom. She's seeing a little moth outside there. And she got obsessed with this moth. So I did this children's story about my cat and the moth. You don't want to repeat yourself. So you have to constantly change. And, you know, if you have you ever read James Joyce's The Dead?
No,
So James Joyce is
that's a
arguably a
short
great.
story. Is that a short
It's
story?
yeah, it's the last story in Dublin is and
Okay.
it's technically maybe just makes being a novella, but the end scene where snow keeps falling all over Ireland. This is what I say to people, is people who say,
I've heard you say this. Yeah.
yeah, okay, so yeah, but you have to keep the ideas coming. Just keep them
Yeah.
coming and write them down. I mean,
Yeah.
I could show you over. Well, where's the fucking desk?
Yeah. Let's see.
Okay, there. So you see folders there. They're all with
Yeah.
ideas or lines or images or whatnot. Write
Yeah.
the shit down. Don't throw things away. Learn to
Here I got note cards.
yeah, yeah,
I write on note cards. I just write shit down.
right.
I learned this. I guess it's basic, but David Lynch is the one who told me to write everything I think down on a note card.
Yeah,
At
and
least
then
in the interview.
here I've got my post-its here with
Yeah.
things from my main character in the book I'm working on now, Bob,
That's
to say
exciting.
or whatnot. And but too often there was a woman that I was once nearly involved with about 25 years ago, and she moved to another country, and yet some years ago I stumbled upon her. You know, you Google up old friends from the neighborhood or people you worked with or whatnot, and so I Googled her name, and she was writing. She did this video where she's saying she's going to write something about like a lesbian version of Moby Dick or something, and I'm like, oh God. and she's got on her wall. You know, she's plotting out each fucking scene. It's guaranteed to be terrible. You have to write organically. Meaning, let's say you wanted to turn this screenplay of yours into a novel. So you're going to plot out the major points or whatnot. But going back to what I said about what John Huston said, you've got a number of good scenes. Now you have to write the bridge moments. If you ever watch in films, or if you ever watch soap operas or whatnot, everything that gets nominated for an Oscar or an Emmy award, you know, it's these tear-jerking scenes. Someone's dying in the bed. Oh, mom, make it. You ask any actor, and I've interviewed 36 or more actors so far, they'll tell you that's the easy stuff. That's the bread and butter.
Yeah.
Any actor can tear up and do the
they say comedy's the hardest. A lot of actors say.
Well, some people say, but the scenes that where you get to see where an actor is really good are those bridge scenes. After the mother has died in the hospital, the man or the woman goes to a bar and they see someone and sitting next to them, and they might say something profound or something. Those are the scenes that are really the scenes that make or break an actor, and that's the kind of thing that in art too. Ultimately, art is about communicating, but you want to communicate something of depth about the reality of the universe. You use fiction, whether it's in poetry, whether it's in drama, whether it's in short stories, novels, whatever. You use fiction to get to the undergirding reality, not truth, because everyone can have their own truth. It's true when people say that. If I'm out on a date with a girl and it goes badly, she'll say, he was an asshole, I'll say she was a twat, and we might both be right. I was an asshole and she's a twat. But the undergirding reality is what you want to get to. What is this thing that we are all participating in? You know, this thing that exists at a certain level. You know, life or existence is a joke. It's a very Kurt Vonnegut-like thing. So where do we get to the core of who we are and what we are and whatnot? I would say that you get that through art. You're not going to get that through philosophy. Philosophy is just ideas. Art, though, is ideas in motion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Vonnegut's a great example of that. I think so. When you talk about diversity in art, and I want to know what you think about someone like John Steinbeck, who is definitely a good writer. In my opinion, one of the better American writers. But would you say he lacks in diversity?
Well, I mean, he did silly things like, I won't say silly, but lesser things like Travels with Charlie.
I feel like
hold on.
Like the
Come on
films
in.
he wrote.
Hold on, my wife is at the door.
Oh, okay.
Come on in.
Are you recording?
Yes, you can be a
Tell her
guest.
to come in.
You can be a guest star.
Hi.
This is my wife.
Hello.
Guest starring Jessica Schneider in an intrusive moment.
I'll start reading her books soon. I'll start reading her stuff. What's the first thing I need to read?
Oh, well, that's a hard question.
Yeah, it is.
I have to think about that. Because there's a lot of them that aren't published. So.
Okay,
He
well,
was
that's
just
fine.
asking
You
about
think of it. You tell him he can email it to me, I guess. And
Yeah. I
can
just
do
hear
that.
you from the other side of the house screaming. I mean, what are you screaming about? Are you
We're
talking.
talking.
We're talking about Bruce?
I've mentioned Bruce.
Oh, good.
This is what it's like being married.
What?
Oh yeah. See, I've never been married, but I have a girlfriend, and we don't live together. Oh, yeah.
This is a kitten, Ozzy, the 7-month-old kitten.
Beautiful.
Okay, come on, take him out.
Okay.
Shut the
All right.
door.
All right.
I love it. I got a dog. I'm a dog guy, but I love cats too. So yeah. Steinbeck, he did some silly things, but I feel like even some of the films he wrote, they're not as great as his novels.
I mean,
I feel like his novels, his best ones are similar.
Well, first off, as far as film is a cooperative art.
Yeah.
When you're a writer, you're God. You know, I can destroy
Right.
galaxies, you know, if
Yeah.
I want to. I can do whatever I want there. That's different when you're doing a drama. And I've written 100 plays, exactly 100
Yeah.
so far. The next one, once I finish this book, is going to do sort of a comedy of manners about Catherine the Great. But uh, Steinbeck, yeah, I mean, if you look at East of Eden is a great pulpy soap opera. Uh, the one with Sharon, what is it? The Grapes of Wrath with Rose of
Yeah.
Sharon. That's a great one. Where
Mhm.
that last scene. Speaking of great ending scenes, where she feeds the bum from her tit. Um,
Yeah.
then Of Mice and Men is a great short
Great
work.
ending.
Now Steinbeck is better than Hemingway. Steinbeck
I
is
agree.
better than
I agree.
Fitzgerald. He's better than Faulkner. You know, when I think of Hemingway, the only thing I can say that was unequivocally great of his was Old Man in the Sea, and that's a novella.
Well, I mean, it's amazing to hear someone say that because I kind of agree. I do like Hemingway. I got most of his novels, but The Old Man in the Sea is the only one I ever read more than once.
Yeah. Well, his short stories, they, he had the ability to do more. Just reading him, he was a very lazy writer, and this is
I
one
like
of the,
Letter to His Son. I like
Yeah.
that poem.
this is one of the things I talk about people with writing. You have to enjoy making art. Why are you doing it if
Yeah.
you're not? You look at so much art today. You know,
I think he was drunk when he made most of his art.
yes, but like look at a lot of politically correct writers. You know, they'll be, they're at some poetry reading, and they'll be like, "When my father touched my pussy, my world
Oh,
fell,
no.
but I strove through the fires of Hades, and I conquered."
So okay, so so I don't know how I don't know if you watch a lot of new films, but like I go to the movies. I love movies. That's probably my primary passion as far as the arts go. So I go watch new films all the time, and the film studio A24. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, but
So they're like kind of the most popular quote unquote independent. They're not even independent anymore. Film studio. But they've made all these movies, and so many of them. Or that they produce so many of these movies, and there are so many like these horror films about trauma and about parental issues, and it's just the same themes in these movies over and over. I went and saw one 3 days ago, this new one called Love's Lies Bleeding, and it was so bad, and it was the whole movie was just about this girl who is in a crime family who has a bad dad. She's a lesbian. She falls in love with this lesbian bodybuilder. She starts giving her steroids. They figure out how bad the dad is. I'm going to spoil it because you're probably never going to watch it. But at the end of the movie, the bodybuilder girl has taken so much steroids that she grows into a giant. She grows into a giant and holds the dad and kills the dad while she's a giant, while the daughter sits there and watches, and then they drive off into the fucking sunset.
I mean, my wife is telling me about a movie called
This
American.
film's getting great reviews. Great reviews, by the way. People think this is a good
My
film.
wife is telling me about this thing called American Fiction, which is about a black. A white writer or a black writer that dumbs herself down to appeal to white audiences. Apropos of what you were saying about this movie, it reminded me of what I call ideational failures. There was a fellow, I think it might have been Ta-Nehisi Coates or another black writer, a few years back won the Pulitzer Prize for a novel about what if the Underground Railroad was really a subway, And it's like this is literally the level of idea. And I read through the book 5 or 6 years ago, and when Jessica and I went to a Barnes and Noble, so I was just sitting there reading the book. It took me, if I recall, it's not that long of a book, under 200 pages. I read it in like 45, 50 minutes. It was ridiculously bad. But this is and so it's not only that people lack skill. They don't have any ideas anymore. This is one of the reasons, for example, I've told people, they need to put a moratorium on Shakespeare because for 50 years, never produced another Shakespeare play for 50 years or so, because that's what people go to. It's either some new PC shit or it's back to Shakespeare, and everything else in the middle that could be done is not done. And like I said, this is bad ideation. You know, if you don't have a good idea, no amount of skill is going to make what you're doing any good.
I read this horrible book recently. It was called Only Americans Burn in Hell. It was written in 2019, and I don't know why I even ordered it. It just showed up on my doorstep. I must have been drunk one night and just bought it on Amazon because I saw somebody say to read it. But I come in and it turns out to be like this book where this, I don't know whether she's a lesbian or I don't even know what she is. She's this superhero, and it's she moves off to an island where there's no men. And they kill all the men. And halfway through the book, the writer takes this diatribe about how his book is not about the Me Too movement because he started writing this book before the Me Too movement. He literally includes this in the novel. And it's just like, I remember I threw it away. It made me so mad that this is something that was published and praised. And that's one of the things I like about the Vincetti brothers is the way you start it. You know, where I guess you're quoting, well, I don't even know what book it is. I think remember.
It starts with Paulie Maravelli was dead.
Well, no. Before that, there's the artist's statement by Manny Cole, where you like show some dribble of like contemporary.
Well, yeah, that was about 10, 12 years ago. My wife knew this guy who had this bad press in England, and I called it Moo Moo Press in my book. Yeah, so I just basically made fun of his whole crap.
Yeah, I thought that was hilarious. I had to read that 3 or 4 times before I even read Paul Valley was dead, just because I thought that was.
Oh, and by the way,
it's timeless. It's timeless is what's so good about it.
Yeah. By the way, it should be noted that if this is going to run soon, I am not Fat Dan Schneider from Hollywood.
Yeah.
I'm because the last week or so, the Nickelodeon thing, he had this terrible thing where he was accused of being an asshole. Boy, I have nothing. I would get 7, 8 years ago people saying, "You raped Britney Spears' sister." You know, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because apparently this Fat Dan Schneider was supposedly, you know, molesting Britney Spears' sister.
He made all these shows that I watched when I was growing up as a kid. Like they were like,
no
you know,
relation.
the kid.
I'm older, I'm thinner, and I'm poorer.
There we go. I thought I was gonna.
And I have real talent.
I might wait to publish it just because everybody's talking about that right now. But I didn't want to offend you about that, but since you brought it up, yeah, I'll probably wait to fucking publish it because
older, thinner, poorer, and actual accomplishment.
Okay. I need to write that down. That because that's hilarious that you older, thinner, poorer, and actual.
And I'll tell you. When I was a kid growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, there was probably an apocryphal story. But, you know, Adolf Hitler had some relatives that lived in the New York area. And so there was this guy supposedly out on Long Island. And again, it's probably an apocryphal story, who ran a bakery. And he ran it for 20-some years from World War I until the mid-30s or something. And then he had to give it up because apparently his name was Adolf Hitler. And people stopped going to his bakery because of that asshole in Germany. So so whenever people mention the Fat Dan Schneider, I think of the Adolf Hitler, the baker, whether he existed or not.
So do you know the congressman from Florida? He's one of the worst, that Matt Gaetz.
I've heard the name.
He's horrible. But there's this I guess reporter named Matt Gertz that anytime Matt Gaetz says something stupid, Matt Gertz just retweets all the people coming at him with just like saying you're a sexist pedophile. It's funny stuff. So yeah, let's talk about your work. Written 100 plays. How many novels have you written?
I probably got somewhere like 25 or 30. I've got
Around
about
25 to 30.
I got about 12 to 15 short story collections, probably 250, probably around 300 short stories. There's probably about 1,300 or so essays that I wrote on Cosmoetica out of the 16 or 1,700 up there. Um, uh, I I mentioned Bruce Ariel having 63 great poems. Uh, I could show you.
Yeah.
I've got a PDF that someone scanned in of all of my poems. It's about
Oh my.
3,400 pages. So I would say I think I have just a little over 1,000 great poems. And
I,
again, in
I,
many different. What?
I was afraid to ask you how many poems you've written. Uh,
I mean, I've written probably over 20,000, but the first
yeah.
9 years was not particularly good, with a few
Right.
exceptions. That would be considered juvenilia. I did. I was once contracted by a subsidy press to write a poem for them, and I did, and then they didn't want to publish it. But I don't want to mention the press because apparently they're very litigious, even 35 years on.
Oh my gosh. So you started your poetry was your first foray into the arts, correct?
And yeah, I wrote to try to woo this girl that I had gone to high school with.
Yeah.
Uh, it it turned out that my guess is that she was abused as a child because she was going with a guy who was like 25 years older than her when she was a teenager. So
Uh, well, and you said you just like went to the library and found like a book
yeah,
of
I
love
just I
poems.
just these types of books. Let me show you this. Here's an old anthology book that my mom actually had. If you see, great poems of the English
Oh
language.
wow.
And so this is probably from the 1920s. William
How
Rose
how many
Benét.
good poems are in there?
I mean, there. I mean, it's a lot of the big names, but
Yeah.
this was probably published in the 20s or 30s. So you're probably not. You wouldn't even gotten someone like a Wallace Stevens. Probably Emily Dickinson is where it would end.
Okay. So I've just recently started reading poetry, and I was always bored with it because the poetry we read like in school was not interesting to me.
Well, what are you
It
talking? The
wasn't.
Walrus and the Carpenter type poetry?
And, yeah, and even some like Edgar Allan Poe,
Uh-huh.
like we'd read a lot of that. But I would say like some of the, and I don't know if you like it, but one of the first ones that struck me was Bukowski because how much he reminded me of Tom Waits' music.
Hmm.
Because I'm a big music fan. That was my first foray into the arts. I like made some music. There's no success or anything like that, but I've messed around with making music for sure. Um, and Bukowski, and then Rainer Maria Rilke. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Yeah, you got it, Rilke.
Yeah, and then recently I've heard you talk about Robinson Jeffers, and I started reading him, and he's really, really good. And I like your poems a lot.
Well, but again, liking them is good, but understanding
Yeah,
why they're good or great is
yeah,
better.
yeah.
And there's a good example. Like not only do I have a lot of sonnets, but I've done sonnets, for example, on criminals, serial killers. I've done
Mm.
sonnets. I
I've seen your
did
video
what?
about the. I've seen the video, the almost documentary, I guess, of when you write the Ed
Oh
Gein
yeah,
poem.
yeah. And so and I'll tell you, that's probably if they were to ever send 10 hours of videos or something up to the stars, they should include that video because I know of no
I
other.
consider that a great film.
Well, yeah, I know of no other artist who has ever created a work of art on film in real
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I
And it
consider that a great film.
yeah,
And in the way you are able to communicate your thoughts while you do it, I think is what makes it so good.
and
Um,
I've said to Alex that if this Bruce documentary takes off, there's a guy named James Emanuel, a black poet that he wants to do. There's a fellow that was in the Uptown Poetry Group I ran with Bruce and
yeah.
I, named Don Morse, who probably has the best long poem since Hard Crane's The Bridge. But if
Mhm.
they did something on me, other than a standard documentary, I told them what we need to do is me to take a week, 7, 9 days off or something. I'll write a
Yeah.
play forget about just a sonnet. I'll write a play in 25 or 30 hours, and you can film the whole 25, 30 hours, and I'll go through it.
I'll do it.
Well, sure.
Like, seriously, that sounds like a great idea. All I need is some money and a flight and a place to stay. I have a camera.
You can stay with me and Jessica, and I mean, just put on.
I mean, yeah. So I've never made a documentary. I've told you I'm thinking about making one this summer. Well, I wouldn't say I've never made a documentary. I've made like small ones, like in school, just about like little things happening at school. And I used to make. When I was younger. Okay, so this is another thing. You wrote a poem about superstar Billy Graham.
Oh yeah.
Actually, did you like wrestling?
Actually, hold on. I just want to show you something. I'm actually. Where do I have it? Oh. I'm actually planning to do a book on superstar Billy Graham.
Hell yeah. Okay. He's awesome and gets where Hulk Hogan is the guy who gets all the praise. Superstar Billy Graham created the entire character. So I think that's a great idea for a book. Is that what do you think about the Superstar Billy Graham and Hulk Hogan? What do you think about that?
Well, I did actually a novel on Gorgeous George, the wrestler from the 40s.
Oh,
and 50s.
really? Can you send that to me?
Yeah, let me write this down before I forget.
Yeah.
Gorgeous George novel to Destin. And by the way, I've heard the name Destiny for a girl. A Destin, is that the male version of Destiny? There's
a city in Florida named Destin.
Oh, okay.
And I'm named after that city. That's where my parents like to vacation. It's great deep sea fishing and good seafood. Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I lived in New York until I was 26, and so I would watch the WWWF then back in the 70s, where you basically had a lot of guys named Moose who were big fat guys with hairy arms, and they wear the whole full leotard.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I went to a high school called Franklin K. Lane High School from 80 to 83. In the 70s, a few years before that, though, and if you're writing that, Wikipedia, if you look at the Wikipedia page on me, they fuck up everything.
Who wrote that? I read that.
A lot of people have done, and they get.
Because these are things I need to get right for my story. You know what I mean? Because it's more a feature about you.
Yeah, I was born in New York City in Booth Memorial Hospital. I was not born in Minnesota. And, And the thing is, because people hate...
I could have figured that out from your novel.
Because people hate me, because I actually, criticize things that need to be criticized, they've had so many trolls over the years remove it. There were actually times, if you go back 10 years ago or whatever, the information was more accurate. But Wikipedia doesn't care about accurate information, just verifiable. So if you wrote something with wrong information, that's verifiable, rather even if it's wrong. Getting back to the wrestling. So they use the high school gym used to host WWF dark cards, and I once saw Andre the Giant wrestle like 15 or 20 midget wrestlers. And you have to understand, back in the 70s, midgets were making a lot of money from these weird things. There was a thing called midget.
There was a midget wrestling show that came through here like 2 months ago.
One that just came here. But there was a thing called dwarf tossing, where people a midget would be in a harness, and these big, super strong guys, like from the Strongest Man's competition, would be throwing the dwarves. Then there was a thing called midget bowling, where they would strap it in and they throw a midget down and bowl.
Well, it's like, and we were talking about Sawdust and Tinsel. There's that group of carny midgets in the Bergman film, in Sawdust and Tinsel, I think it is. Is that the one with the group of the carny midgets?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are midgets.
Yeah, I hope I'm using the right term. I don't know if midget is.
Well, if you get to the point where you read Norwegian, I have a character called Bit von Rheingold who is a dwarf Jewish pornographer, but he hates the word dwarf. He prefers midget because he thinks dwarf makes him a magical being. So,
Okay.
and his motto is
Interesting.
his motto is, "I'm a perverse little Jew that just likes women to shit on me," literally, because he's so he's one of my great characters, because in there there's a 900,000 word digression from the main narrative where Bit von Reingold is doing drugs with what's his name, Dennis Hopper, and a few other people, and he goes tripping through.
There's an actor to do drugs with in that time. I guess Dennis Hopper's the right pick.
And so the dwarf character goes tripping through American literature, meeting like Tom Sawyer.
I've heard you. I can't wait to read that. Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Now people would say 900,000 words. It's so long, and it's one of the things in a book like that, and even with Vincetti Brothers, is like I have the legend teller thing in Tumbleweeds.
Right.
You can pick, when I do these big novels.
And you're the legend teller, right?
It's possible that it's an older version of Manny Cole, but again, it doesn't need an answer.
No, it doesn't. But I just wanted to guess, because it's fun to talk to the artist who wrote something with something to guess at and say.
But here's the thing I'll tell you. I deliberately, in a lot of the books, leave things up in the air. In fact, I killed off Bit von Reingold in an earlier book called Bit of Golem, and I brought him back, and I'd forgotten I killed him off in that book, and so I had to retroactively make it that I often have different voices, and we don't know where something's coming from.
Yeah.
I mentioned that center of mass.
Which is true. I know you don't like to say, I know you don't agree with like artist truth, but that's true. Just like in the telling of history and just the retelling of stories, like the accuracy is not always there. And I think,
and if you want to be realistic, it has to be inaccurate. And this is what I said about forgetting. To not only forget the specifics of a story, but the reason that it's good to do that is it enhances the realism. And if I'm in a different book in a different time with a different character talking about another character from another book in a different time, of course it's going. If let's say I never hear from you again after this interview or when you publish this piece, and 15 years later, someone asked me, Dan, whatever happened to that kid that interviewed you that one time? You still hear from him? I said, no, I never have. I don't know whatever happened to him, but that's the way life is. People flutter in and flutter out. Life is an ephemeral thing.
Well, I'll be sending you the rewritten version of my screenplay, so we'll hopefully you'll read that for me.
Here's the thing: is don't rewrite it in just a week's time. Take your
time.
No,
I'm not.
If it's 6 months or 9 months from now, that's better, because I literally have had people. One time I made the mistake. This kid in England, he wrote a mediocre poem, and he kept saying, I kept saying, this doesn't work for that. He wanted to be on the page in Cosmoetica where I have poetry, new poetry. I forget what I call it, but it ended up that he's emailed me 20 times, and I said, well, if you did this, it ended up that literally 80% of the poem I wrote. So I put it up on my fucking website just to get rid of him. It's like, but I literally wrote 80% of it by improving it.
I'm just gonna take with really the main things I'm gonna take with what you told me. The names, changing some of the names, 'cause those are things that I didn't even notice. Kevorkian was intentional. Jim Patterson was not
James
intentional.
Patterson is a famous mystery writer.
I know. Once you said that, I was like, that's like my dad's favorite fucking author. I've read one of his books, and that was enough. But so yeah, change that one. And I do like what you said about the start, because a couple of I've had other people read it who liked it more than you, but they're not, as critical, or nor if they've read as much or smart in literature. But they kind of said the beginning was bumpy. So I think taking out that scene and going straight into that has made my pacing a lot better. Like on my rewrite right now, like I said, I think I'm at 19 pages, but I'm kind of close to the point in the other version where I was about at 40 pages.
Okay.
Yeah. So hopefully that that helps it out quite a bit. You know, I thought it was interesting. You said Cohen and Cormac. I wasn't really going for Cohen. Cormac for sure. I love his books.
Well, see, to me, Cormac McCarthy is sort of
what
like.
do you think about him? I've never heard you talk about him.
I say he's sort of like William Faulkner. He overwrites. He tends to go for the cheap gore. That's not to say that he doesn't. Just like with Faulkner, he can have a really terrific paragraph, but then you'll go 14, 18 pages for the next nugget. And to me, he's sort of a more modern Faulkner in that way. They're very similar writers, I think, in that regard.
Yeah. I feel like Suttrie's a great book.
Who?
Suttree.
I didn't read that. I read the one, the horses.
All the Pretty Horses.
Yeah.
Blood Meridian.
The Meridian. And what's the third one on the plane?
The Road's popular.
The Road is a bad book.
Yeah, the Road's bad.
It's a bloated, bad Twilight Zone episode.
The Road was not good. That's the most popular one. Like when I
because it's only 120 pages.
Yeah, it won something, didn't it? Did it win a Pulitzer? I don't know.
I think it did.
I mean, look,
another guy,
Pulitzer Prize winner, right there. Yeah.
Yeah, another guy who's very overrated is Don DeLillo. I read. I
like White Noise.
The only one that I read is Underworld, and it starts off with that good. It started off as a short story, the 1951 baseball game, the playoff between the Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers, and that's a good solid thing. But then it just totally fucks up. Now that having been said, that the things I can say against McCarthy or DeLillo, they're way better than David Foster Wallace. I mean, he's just a total piece of shit. Dave Eggers a shit. William Volman a piece of shit. Thomas Pynchon.
I know you don't like Pynchon.
Their stuff is just. If you read,
I don't want to debate you, but have you read Vineland by Pynchon?
No, but I will. I will tell you, to get back to Gravity's Rainbow. Just read. I mentioned Vonnegut. Read Slaughterhouse 5. Slaughterhouse 5 is 1/5 the length, and it's the same basic story.
I agree. And I agree. I read
Mason and Dixon. That was the other one I read, and
I have trouble getting through that one.
I can't remember what it's about.
I have trouble getting through that.
For example, like with David Foster Wallace, all I remember about that piece of shit I read The King in His Room or whatever, the last
the Pale King.
The Pale King. Yeah, I read the one that he did. He did notes on a science book. Then there's one that was some short stories that were terrible. And then with Infinite Jest, I remember Quebec, Tennis, a few other. This is the thing when
there's some things I like about Infinite Jest, but I feel like with most of his other work, I agree with you.
Well, I mean, it's a juvenile book. There's no development of character. If you don't have character, you don't have a story.
Yeah, that's fair. The ending, I was so mad when I finished that book. The ending was horrible.
Well, when you read A Norwegian in the Family, that is not. I'll say there's a difference between great and best. I've written better stuff, but it's the greatest. Well, when I finished Vincetti Brothers, I said to myself, I just wrote the greatest novel ever written. Then a few years later, I wrote A Norwegian in the Family, which is over 4 times as long. And if you look at it, it does everything. I throw everything in the kitchen sink. It's not only the greatest novel written, it's the greatest postmodern novel. And I would argue it's the greatest work of art that one single artist has ever produced. Because when you look at these super long books that are over 1 million words, if you go on Wikipedia, the longest books ever, they're all gimmick writing. You know, there's like a book called The Book. It's the word "the" written, like 10 million times.
What?
The book. It's called. There's a novel.
That's real?
Yes, with the word "the." It's the only word 10 million times.
Why? What's the point of it?
They get to say.
What is the point of that? Can you tell me? I don't know.
Look it up. Look, and then there's like a 100 million word novel. A guy who was a bad poet who wrote a book. Richard. He's got something. Oh, what the hell is his name? I don't have all the stuff with me, but a bad poet wrote this book, and it's just throwing lots. But anyway, if we're talking about a real novel, if you've ever read Proust's Remembrance of Things Past or In Search of Lost Time, my book is almost double the length. But the thing is, I don't have, I often said with Proust, it's 300 pages of great writing and 3,000 of shit.
Okay. So, Pinchon, I've heard several of your rants about him, because it seems like people like to get you to rant. I don't want you to rant about him, but I do want to, one thing that I thought your novel did really well, Tumbleweeds, and as an American novel, and you write at the beginning of Vincenzi Brothers that you considered a great American novel, and I think it is too. It reminds me of Twain. I think I told you it also reminds me of Dickens, who is the novel that it's closest to. Novelist.
The novel it's closest to is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, because there's actually a scene.
I've never read that.
You have to read it. It's the greatest 20th century novel written by a woman in America, but. There's actually a scene that in Tumbleweeds, if you remember, where I have my dad character, I think is delivering stuff to vaccinations or something, and it's very similar to a scene, and I had forgotten about it, but it's very similar to a scene in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but that's set in 1915 or whatever it is, whereas mine is set in the 1960s. But that. If we're talking published novels, leaving me out of it, I would say Moby Dick, Slaughterhouse-Five, Huckleberry Finn, and A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. That's your Mount Rushmore of great novels up until the mid-20th century. And the greatest of them is Moby Dick, because it's the longest. It does the most.
I'm trying to think. Oh man, it'd be so hard for me to pick a Mount Rushmore. See, I'm kind of in that vein where I love the Russian moralists. Like I love Anna Karenina. I love The Idiot. I love The Idiot.
The Idiot. There's like Crime and Punishment. Then there's the other one. Is it The Idiot?
Dossier. The brother Karamazov is the other.
Karamazov. I mean, but I'll give you an example. Crime and Punishment's ending just we don't need to see him in the camp at the end.
I agree completely. When the first time I read that novel was a couple years ago. It was a friend told me to read it. Yeah. I read it and I said I didn't need the epilogue.
But
I didn't need the epilogue.
You want to know what the worst ending in a piece of art that can be considered great is? Do you want it to? It's a film. Go ahead. See if you can guess it. The worst. This is what I would pick, but
Rashomon.
Yes. The ending with the and the baby,
everything about
and it's like,
film
what the
great.
Fuck? You have just done
Everything
not only a
about
great
great.
movie, but you've done a great movie that's breaking the then boundaries of what film can do.
So all these different points
and
of
you
view
go
and
to the
ideas
most
of truth.
mawkish, shitty piece of symbolism. The last 2 minutes take that from arguably his best film down to maybe number 10.
What do you think is his best film?
The best film would be High and Low.
Yeah.
High and Low is the best crime drama ever. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, I actually, that's like one of the ones I haven't seen.
Yeah. High and Low, the ending, and I don't believe
I'm
spoilers,
going to watch it tonight, though. I actually plan to watch that film tonight.
Okay, so, but I don't want to spoil it for you, but I don't believe
Don't
in
spoil
spoilers.
a damn thing.
But when you see the ending, literally the last 5 or 10 seconds is just a fantastic. Another great film that's often overlooked, and I think Kurosawa is better in his modern films actually than in his epics, his historical epics.
Yeah.
The Bad Sleep Well. If you want to,
I watched that recently.
Yes,
that's a great film.
I mean, here, 60 years ago, more than 60 years ago,
in Japan,
we're shown the evils of corporations.
Crony capitalism. Yeah, it's a total takedown of crony capitalism via Hamlet.
And the thing is, if you've ever read The Devil's Dictionary by Ambrose Bierce, it says, it gives humorous definitions. It says a corporation, an ingenious tool meant to minimize responsibility and maximize profit, or something like that. That The Bad Sleep Well shows this perfectly, and it shows because the big bad is a vice president we never see. It's not the guy who's the big bad within most of the film. He answers. He's just an errand boy.
Well, I think the first time you see the vice president, he's introduced as a nice guy. He's with his daughter, right?
But he's not the vice president. He's
okay.
The vice president is the guy at the end where the bad guy is talking to him, and you can hear just from the way he's on the phone. You know, he's a bootlicker, and he could be crushed by the vice president. That's such a great film, and another great film, contemporary film, Ikiru. Talk about a tearjerker. Ikiru. Awesome. You know.
Death of a bureaucrat.
And this is why, you know, it's so difficult because these are such fantastic films. And then of course Seven Samurai, Rashomon minus the last 2 minutes.
I like Throne of Blood and Ran a lot.
They're very good, but the one before Ran I think is even better. The one in color.
How do you pronounce Kagemusha?
Kagamusha, that's right.
Kagamusha.
Yeah,
that's a good one too.
That's a fantastic film too. Redbeard is another great film, and
I haven't watched that one.
And Mifune is such a fucking great actor. You know,
yeah, he's the best.
I mean, he's got a number of those kind of, you know, the stuff where he's the master, and you know, but when he's playing a straight character like he does in Redbeard or a couple of the other films, it shows what a terrific act in High and Low.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd say I've never seen it. I've watched the first half of it several times, but I just don't have the time to finish it when I've watched it. So I know this plot.
He is so good in High and Low.
Yeah.
And this is how it makes you wonder. For
what
example,
about Stray Dog? What do you think about Stray Dog?
Oh,
it's the one where he's the cop and he loses his gun. And it's a late 40s noir film and
it's a good solid film. I don't remember it that much. The first one that he did, I remember there's one where they're on the mountainside with snow. I forget the name of that film.
I don't think
the early 40s. Rashomon is though when he becomes a master.
Yeah.
Other than the 2 minutes there. But
that's
anyway.
Funny. Yeah, he's great. So, what do you think about Lynch?
I mean, Mulholland Drive. You know, I want to see two gorgeous girls finger each other or whatever.
So there was okay. So Mulholland Drive. I thought about what you wrote in the beginning of Vincetti Brothers. This is a note I have where you wrote, "Now I think I'm more apt to do a longer, more complex tale that's akin to the shit that Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and all them Russian novelists from the 19th century did. The Russian Mormonot, you get it." And then you say something about a great writer like myself would want to dwarf someone like Cervantes or Shakespeare, just as Beethoven did not back down from Mozart. Is Mulholland Drive, is Lynch not backing down from Bergman and Fellini?
He's not doing anything even remotely similar. I mean,
but no, well, okay, I think it's very similar to Persona.
Well, then you
have the director character, which reminds me of
there's no fundament of the characters. It's very obvious. It's something. This is what happens sometimes when you have the bit. Because if you know the back, you don't have to know this, because I think the film itself is so chock full and Swiss cheese plot hole wise in terms of a lot. And I've read many of the people theorizing they know what it's really about or whether. But
I think it's about an emotion.
But what happens is, this was supposed to be his television series. It was supposed to be a TV series. And so what he did, he filmed 4 or 5 episodes and then edited it down. It's basically a Reader's Digest condensed version of the first 5 episodes or whatever of this series he was supposed to do. And what he's relying on is when I say something like, I don't need to answer every question in a novel, he's saying, oh, that's good. I don't have to have any basis for an artistic rationale for anything, because I can then say as an artist, well, I'm not going to explain it. But there's a difference when you fill in enough that for example, if you look at what you might call the lacunae narratively in some of my books and other great works of art, like someone like Wells does, what you can do, you can reasonably fill things in, and there might be 3 or 4 different ways you can view something. But when you have this big gaping hole and it's infinitely fillable, that's telling you that what the artist is doing is pawning off the creation area, the ideation on the reader or the viewer. And
I see what you mean.
And
there's
now a better one. Hold on. What's the one he did with Hopper as the
Blue Velvet?
Okay, that's not a great film, and it starred my friend George Dickerson. In fact.
Okay, cool.
But that's a better film than Mulholland Drive.
Oh, I probably like Mulholland Drive more just because I think it what I was saying. I think it goes for I like what he's swinging for. I think it's a big swing. I don't think he completely knocks it out of the park, but I think it's a good try, and I like that. I wouldn't. And so then, as far as
then Eraserhead, that one is eh.
What about Twin Peaks?
The the Fire Walks with Me movie or the TV show?
All of it.
I found it boring. It's like Twin Peaks. Like, here's another thing. I can't stand the idea when people talk about the cable TV golden era. Get the fuck out. Lost was a piece of shit. The Sopranos is totally unrealistic. The Mad Men was a good soap opera its first 3 years. Seasons 4 and 5 were
Breaking Bad is good.
And I didn't watch the last 2 because it was going in the dumpster. Not Better Call Saul. What was the one? It was
Breaking Bad.
Breaking Bad. Again, laughably. These people clearly, like I said with the Brokeback Mountain, that writer never met a male homosexual. These people have never talked with. Or what they'll do is, we went to a prison and we asked people who involved in the drug trade, this or that. It's like with Goodfellas. There are so many bullshit stories in Goodfellas that are stories that I, as a kid, when I was 10, 12, heard about gangsters that are used here. That Scorsese, who didn't know anything about gangsters, just threw in because he thought that was what really happened. I'll give you an example. You know that scene in
Goodfellas, a lot of it comes from Pileggi,
who bullshat himself.
Okay,
you know that
Talk
scene.
about that. Let me hear that.
You know
that
scene.
Talk about Pileggi.
Well, I want to talk about this scene.
Okay.
The main character, the guy who died, Ray Liotta's child character. I don't know who the actor was, but there's that scene where he loses his cherry and he goes to court, and outside the court, he the mobs is all going. Yeah. That would never happen. When I was a kid, I worked in a mob place. I didn't even know the names of the people who ran the fucking warehouse that I worked in, much less knowing what capo they worked for. That would never happen. And if that did really happen, that would be a mobster that deserved to go to jail because he'd be.
So you think it's this Henry Hill guy who's full of shit?
Henry, of course. You know with the Godfather.
I agree. I've seen his interviews.
With the Godfather, they said how that was just Shakespearean stuff made up by Coppola. But what happened is the real gangsters then took that and they started acting the part because they, in terms of have you ever heard the mafia didn't deal drugs? They were fucking dealing drugs from the 1920s onward. This idea that they didn't want to deal drugs is total bullshit. See, now
from The Godfather.
See how I shifted into the sociological stuff from these films, but
no, that's great. I love to hear that, and I love to hear someone who has that knowledge of that because a lot of my knowledge of that comes from those films. And one of the things I noticed when I got a little further into Tumbleweeds and started reading. I haven't finished the Vincetti Brothers, but I'm reading it right now. Is that they're the first good novels that approach mobs that I've read. I feel like
I think they're both crime novels, Norwegian and this one.
Yeah.
But they're not crime novels in the sense that like Elmore Leonard writes. And Elmore Leonard is actually not a bad writer. If you want to talk about who's going to be read in 2100 of published writers, I'll guarantee you Elmore Leonard will not only be read, but he'll be considered literarily higher than Foster Wallace or Pynchon.
What about Chandler? What do you think about Raymond Chandler? He's earlier, but what do you think about his crime novels?
I've only read one or two of his stuff. I mean, he's good. Dashiell Hammett was good, but
I think his stuff's good.
They are to crime novels what Isaac Asimov and Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke were to sci-fi. And I think
I've read more of Asimov's nonfiction than I have his
Well,
fiction.
yeah,
His
he wrote like
nonfiction's
550
really good.
books or something. So
Yeah, like he has a book. He has a nonfiction book called The Roman Republic. That's like probably my favorite history book on the Roman Republic I've ever read.
have you ever read Gibbon?
Uh-uh.
Edward Gibbon, the decline and fall of the Roman Empire.
I need to read that one.
Historically, a lot of people will pick it apart, and it's true that it's pretty bad history. 150 years on, we know things that were false, and he probably made stuff up. But if you're talking about a good read, you don't have Isaac Asimov's foundation without Gibbon and the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. It's a monumental work. It's like, what is it, 15, 20 volumes? Maybe it's only 12 volumes, depending on, it's one of those things, depending on how big the thing is, it might be, 12 books or 20 books, depending on how it's broken up, but.
Yeah. So, so let's see what else we could talk about. How much time do you have? How long do you want to go?
I can go. I'm off. I told you. So yeah, I checked off everything I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I've gotten the main things from my story. We talked to. I do want to talk a little bit more about your. I want to talk about poetry as an art form right now. Is it? And I don't want to say like I know it's like a lot of people say it's dead or whatever. What do you think? Are there great poets right now
that have been published in the last 30 or 40 years? No, because
would you consider rappers poets?
In the same way that you could consider, Dr. Seuss a poet. I mean, it's not.
No. Like, have you or someone like New York State of Mind? Have you ever read the lyrics to that song by Nas?
Well, now you're getting into the territory talking about like Bob Dylan winning the Nobel Prize for Literature. I mean, it's not.
No, I wouldn't agree. I'm just saying, like, if they're, I'm not. I'm not saying they're great poets. What I'm saying is, if there's any decent poetry I've heard during my lifetime, it's come from rappers.
Well, I'll tell you, Jim Morrison's song lyrics for The Doors were better than his actual published poetry.
Yeah.
But the thing with a song lyric is that the song lyric depends upon the emotional glue of the music. When you just have you only read the poems on Cosmoetica?
Yeah, I think that's all I have access to.
Because I have a poem. I can't say the N word, but I have a poem called an SPIC. It's my 9th murder poem, I think. An SPIC. Yeah. And I really saw this. There was a place, and speaking of mafia stuff, I lived just a block away from what was called Atlas Terminal. It was the biggest drug dealing center on the East Coast back in the 60s and 70s. And there would be blacks and Hispanics that would come to get from the mafia guys and whatnot. And me and my friends would hang out on the railroad tracks, and the kids, we'd see this stuff. And I remember one night, the Spanish guy and this black guy got into some fucking argument. They pulled out switchblades. And, they're doing the Sharks and the Jets kind of thing from
like a West Side Story.
Yeah. But and I forget now, 40 some years later, 45 years later, I forget which guy stabbed which guy, and we saw them fell, and we just got the fuck out of here because one of those guys is a killer or whatnot. But I decided to write it, and the most interesting part in there is I have the refrain, "Aloner than a girl amongst old boys." So in that milieu that's dealing with urban poverty, racism, I sneak in a little thing about the male aggressive trait to it, and these are the kinds of things you don't see. You could, and I've read that poem out loud when I back in the 90s in Minnesota when I wrote that, and people would be talking and then midway through that poem, once I used the epithets, the SPIC and the N word, people stopped and they listen, but then you could see the faces, and this is one of the things I really enjoyed about reading. Not that I was a great reader, but I wrote great poetry, so I just had to be an adequate reader. I didn't have to go, I didn't have to do all that histrionic
performance
stuff. But when you get them and you make a loud room silent, that tells you all you need to know about the work itself.
Yeah. I've never been to a poetry reading or anything like that. I mean, I don't
Don't
even
go to
know if
any
that's a thing
modern
that.
ones.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It doesn't sound like something I'd want to go to.
There was. Have you ever
Um,
heard of a group called the New Eurekans?
uh-uh.
Back in the early '90s, MTV had a thing called, spoken word with the New Eurekans. It was on for 2 or 3 years. I knew a girl there named Maggie Estep. She died about 10 years ago. Um, that was all fucked up. They all of these kinds of groups, whether it's beatniks or these New Eurekans or whatnot.
Yeah.
All it is, they don't care about the art. All
Yeah, I
they
feel
want
like
to do is
people
work
aren't
up.
serious. That's one of the things that I noticed when like I've gone to like filmmaking. They have like happy hours, or even like there's this group, and they do great stuff. They put on great films, and it's great for the arts here in Arkansas. But they'll have like events where they'll play a film and people will come see it. And just some of the people there is just they're not serious about it. Some guy who has a podcast, is sitting next to you. You ask him like what his favorite film is, and it's who even something that came out within the last 10 years, but he's a film critic. And he has a podcast, and it's just like it's a lot of people who aren't serious about it, and it almost feels like to find people who are serious about it, you got to naturally find them within your life.
Well, if you want to
just
see, if
meet
you
them
want to see,
online, talk to someone.
if
like
you want
you.
to see good films, you have to go outside of the U.S.
Absolutely.
The fellow who won for 12 Years a Slave. That's a very good film, and maybe it was the best film Hollywood made. But his two earlier films, especially the one Shame,
McQueen.
Yeah, Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
His film Shame is about it's not it's about this guy who has no control over his life. He's a sex addict and it's really good. But I'll tell you, the living filmmaker who's arguably the best is a Turkish guy named Nuri Bilge Ceylan, and his last film was a bit of a downer compared to some of the other films, but it's still a very good to excellent film.
I've never even heard of him.
Once Upon a Time in Anatolia is a great fucking film. Winter Sleep is a great film. Climates. Look him up. If you have Criterion Collection, he might be on it. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if he is.
But he's someone who does a lot of stuff talking. His last film, which I said was not quite as good as some of the other stuff, is about a guy who's basically a pedophile but never acts on it. And you get hints of that throughout the movie, and other stuff happens. But at the end, he gets into this rapturous soliloquy about this 12 or 14-year-old girl in his class that he lusts for, but he's never acted upon it. But he acts as if they have some kind of relationship, which he spends the movie denying that he did anything inappropriate, which he never touched the girl or whatnot. But it's about his having this feelings for these girls, this girl, and
the mental.
Yeah, so he's got the. Technically, I guess because you hit puberty, he'd be a hebophile or an ephebophile. That's a bit older than, because a pedophile technically is someone who likes children prepubescent. But so there's a lot, even though that's not one of his top films, it's still gargantuan leagues beyond Hollywood. And I have to mention one of the most underrated films of all time is The Killing of a Chinese Bookie by John Cassavetes, the long version. That. The longer, you've seen it?
Yeah, of course.
There's that great monologue he does with the strippers at the end, the black girl at the house where he's been shot, and he's just going on. Man,
that's great drama. I love that, and I love Opening Night. I think those are his two best.
Yes,
films.
That and Faces are the three great ones.
Okay, so maybe I need to watch Faces again. Because I thought Faces was really good. I think I missed a couple beats. It's pretty I guess experimental for when it came out.
And it's a very downbeat. And the ending though, where the husband walks out, his wife is slumped on the stairs, and he just walks out, and that's it. Now some people will talk about Nicky and Mikey, which was done by Elaine, what's her name, and then
it's all right.
And Husbands has some good stuff, but it's not. But to me, the three that are just total. And people will always talk about the one with Jenna Rollins as Under the Influence, a woman under the influence.
Under the influence.
But that's a little too over the top for me.
Yeah, I don't like it as much as Opening Night or Bookie or
Yeah,
even.
and Opening Night is underrated. And I took and when
That's
you
an
read,
art piece. That's an art film
yeah,
more than it is.
yeah, I actually
Which is
took the
cool.
scene where he kills the bookie and I reworked that into what I call the Massapequa Massacre at the end of the
Oh,
Machete Brothers.
dude. The scene when he realizes he has to kill the bookie.
Yeah.
And they tell him, you know what I mean? That's such a good scene.
And here's a perfect example of a film. We don't know anything past, other than he's the strip club owner. How
Right,
does this
yeah.
guy
You don't know shit.
Yeah, how does this guy know how to get away with a murder? He outsmarts sort of on the fly the 3 or 4 guards that this bookie has, and it's like, so but we don't need to know it. Why do you need to know it? Doesn't it make it more interesting to theorize? Well, he was a Korean War vet, or
Yeah.
maybe he was a hired killer at some point. We don't know, and
Yeah.
and you don't have to know. What really is terrible in modern art is this obsessive desire to know every fucking trick that is going to be made. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Why do
Yeah.
you need to know everything?
I think part of that is just like having the internet and the access to everything. And like, people do interviews and they'll say everything. Some artists they'll do an interview and they'll say everything their film's about.
Now, there are some times in my art, though, where I'll have a character didactically. For example, I did my first children's book. I mentioned Baby and Buddy. I did a book, do I have it right here? Let me see. Oh, yeah. It's called A Kid's Book. And that's my cat,
Okay.
Oscar. He died a few years ago. And in the book, I have a kids-only version and I have an adult version. And it's basically about Oscar. Oscar's owner is not me in the book. It's another character gets pregnant, and he thinks that his mom isn't going to love him because of the new child that is coming. So he runs away and has some adventures. He comes back,
Cool.
but there's an outer adult thing where I have a couple of characters who are stupid, who are reading the book along with it. Now they express things that some people have said aren't needed or didactic, and I agree with that in one sense. But when you put when you put the adult version there, it's dealing with things that aren't expressed in the book, but it expands the cosmos of the work too. So
Yeah.
and you have to, like I said, you have to just not do the same old. You have to take chances, and so few artists take chances. They don't enjoy the art that they make. They don't enjoy art. They look at art as political statements only. And you can have, you mentioned for Tumbleweeds, Vincetti Brothers, everything is going to have some tinges of the political, some tinges of the religious.
If it's a true, if it's a story that's based in reality at a certain point in time, there's the political environment the story exists in, and I really think there's really not much more that needs to be done outside of that. You have the political environment the story exists in, and if it comes into the story, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so anyway, on to the next thing. What else do you have on your list?
What do you think about Robert Altman?
Some stuff was very good. MASH was a very good film. Nashville is a very good film. The Player is a good film. McCabe and Mrs. Miller is not a particularly good film.
You don't like it?
No. Again, dislike.
Okay.
When you're talking about don't go there. But the one he does with Philip Marlowe, that's another.
The Long Goodbye.
Yeah, that's another one that's so very hit and miss. It's like when he's at his worst, he's like Night of the Hunter with Charles Lawton, that Charles Lawton film. It's too obvious. He's at his best when he's more subversive. A terrible movie that Altman did was the one of Vincent Van Gogh. He has this overweening music.
I haven't even seen that one.
It's ugh.
I'll make sure I don't watch it.
Well, no, watch it because you need to know why something fails. It's as important
That's true.
to know why something succeeds.
I go to the movies often enough though today to see it on a weekly basis. To be honest with you, why a movie fails, but I think, but yeah, it is interesting to watch good artists when make something bad sometimes, or
Well,
struggle.
this is the thing I said is the most important kind of art, if you want to learn, isn't great art and it's not bad art. It's near great art. Because
Okay.
when you have the near great, you're able to see what's working, but you're all when you have that few moments where it fails and it falls to not great, you can peek behind the curtain and see the mechanism. It's more obvious because you have something great, but something is not quite ticking. It's like Rashomon. That bad ending so starkly puts into relief why the rest of the film works, and fortunately, Kurosawa learned because he never again had a bad ending, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, no, his endings are always fantastic. I'm trying to think of any other things I want to ask you about. I mean, there's things I can go all day about films and novels. I mean, you've already given me your Mount Rushmore of novels. You said Moby Dick. You said A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. What were the other two?
Slaughterhouse-Five and Huckleberry Finn.
Okay, yeah, those are good. Those are good. What's
Now,
your favorite?
two of them, Huckleberry Finn and Moby Dick, are probably on a lot of people's.
Yeah,
People would probably more argue with Vonnegut and Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Probably is not even
yeah.
mentioned.
The only one I haven't read, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Let's see. Yeah, that
But
pretty much
Huckleberry
sums
Finn is
up
a
a
good
lot.
example of something that's
Yeah.
great. It's a great book. Is it a great novel? I mean, it doesn't. It's
Okay.
arguably has misses some beats here and there, but and this is another thing. There's a fundamental difference between a great work of art and a perfect
Yeah.
work of art. A perfect work of art means you've hit all the technical points. But if
What's
it's
a perfect work of art?
what?
What's a perfect work of art?
I have a poem called Congolian Footfalls. That's a perfect poem, but the poem itself is only about a dream state. It's a dream fugue, and it perfectly
Uh-huh.
captures the way I and other people have told me they've dreamt. But there isn't anything deeper. Now you could make an argument that makes it great, maybe, but if it is, it just barely gets over. But I've had poems and I that when I look back, I say, oh, I should have changed that word. Oh, they were
Yeah.
early great poems. Like I've got a free verse sonnet called "War," which is about when I saw this woman running around a corner naked and bloody, and a car came screaming around the corner, pulled her in, and drove away. This was every day. When I was a kid, I was picked up by people in black sedans. Some of them legal cops or FBI people, or sometimes just gangsters that picked me up. I was once, for example, in the late '80s. I was working on a campaign of a woman who was running for assemblyman position in New York. This is when I was a Democrat, and her opponent was a guy who was backed by the mob. Uh, she lost to the mob back guy, and then the mob guy lost to a Republican mob guy, and the mob guy, the mob guy who won was a real piece of shit. And when I was outside the polling place, saying vote for this gal, he didn't like the fact that I had said he was a crook and whatnot, and so a few days later, I'm picked up off the streets by this guy's goons, and they take me to this place. There was a serial killer named David Berkowitz, the 44 caliber killer back in the 70s, and there was a famous spot that still had the outline of this girl Stacy Moskowitz that he shot, and this was a decade later, and I was taken to this office where I was threatened that if I ever did anything to embarrass this guy in public again, I would suffer the consequences. And he had a guy who was a doctor there who was had been an abortionist when abortion was illegal before it became legal and now is illegal again. And well, I mean, I could just go on with a lot of these stories.
Yeah, so that made me think of, okay, so one of the things I loved in Tumbleweeds, you have the politician character named John Doe.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just because in the grand scheme of things, they're nobodies.
Yeah.
And I thought that just something as simple as that I thought was so good.
Yeah. But
because,
I mean,
you know, like I said, I worked for some politicians, and it is what it is.
And the thing is, the real John Doe, I actually did a play where he was fucking this underage girl and got her pregnant and forced her to get an abortion, even though he was pro-life. And this is a guy who was 35, 40 years older than this girl at the time. So he was a hemophile then, and he's a piece of shit. Now, once he fucking dies, he's close to 100, I think. But once this fucking piece of shit dies, I always was like, well, I'm gonna talk about who he was maybe on my YouTube channel when he dies. But then I'm thinking, well, you know, at this point, does it really matter? Because I mean, yes, historically, if someone asked me, I would, you know, who was John Doe in real life, and he's dead, I'll say it. But do I really want to go out of my way to upset his children who would say, my dad was never involved with the mafia? I know he was, because he picked me up with good guys running for a local political position don't have the money to have goons unless they're in someone's pocket.
And that's like sort of that's something like with my screenplays. You know, there's tons of real people these characters are based on, like throughout, you know, like our county's history, and I you know, making up names and, you know, taking two people and making them one, or, you know, just doing things that are more convenient for storytelling. And especially now that I'm like trying to slim it down, because it is, when I wrote it, I knew it was too long. Because it was like 145. I've read most of the great screenplays I've read are like not even close to that long. I knew it was too long, so I'm slimming it down in areas, and I wouldn't want to, you know, it's a series. I wouldn't want to use the real names. Like, I feel like that's.
Well, let me give you my experience. And this is both in terms of the companies you work for. People who are rich and corporations, they own the legal system. You can tell the truth, but unless you can defend the truth and have the money to defend the truth, you might as well not be. Because I'll give you an example. No. There was a guy who years ago stalked me for a number of years. He had come to my poetry group, and he said a lot of bad things about me in public spaces. And so when a story was done about me in a local newspaper in Minnesota years ago, people asked me, because this guy replied to the stories, and they asked me, why is this guy being such an asshole? And on my website, I replied to him and told him what he had done about harassing women and whatnot. And this person, you know, they basically you know, threatened to sue me if I didn't take it down, and so I learned a valuable lesson that you can be right, you can be telling the truth, but. And this person even said to me when I took it, I said, "Why are you doing this?" And the guy said to me, I said, you know, I'm telling the truth. He said, "It does not matter." He said, "I will bleed you dry," meaning that he would file, bullshit lawsuit after lawsuit, even if I had the money to burn and lose. And then I learned later on, working for various companies, I lost a job about 10 years ago with a company I'd worked for almost 10 years, and it's because. They were breaking, it was in the grocery industry, they were breaking local county health laws. And the company supposedly said, you know, if you see anyone doing anything bad, you need to report it. So I went to my grocery manager, which following the protocol, he reported on up. That was that. A few weeks later, a couple of things happened where they basically had people lie about me and they fired me. Because the people who were breaking the laws and breaking the county health and safety laws were the number one and number two guy at the store. So those two incidents, the guy who was a scumbag, who then threatened to just sue me into oblivion even if he kept losing, and then the way that companies, especially corporations, they can twist the law because of the money. And I've always argued we need to get to the state of a pelfless, P-E-L-F, pelf, a pelfless society. We need to move away from a currency of pelf to a currency of accomplishment. Now, humanity is not evolved enough to do this currently, and it's not going to be in your lifetime or your grandkids' lifetime. but maybe in a couple of 100 years, people will get to that. Maybe the one good thing that happens because of global warming is people stop valuing things that don't have any real great great value.
Yeah, absolutely. Like yeah, like a big truck. Uh, you live in Texas now, right? So
Yeah.
you're around a lot of you see the trucks people have.
Oh
You see
yeah,
the houses they sit outside of too, and
yeah.
you're just like,
But before streaming came along, you'd have trailers with fucking satellite dishes half the size of the trailers.
yeah, yeah. It makes absolutely no sense. So what is I'm writing this story about you and your work as a poet. We talked about your novels. We talked a lot about your. We've talked a little bit about your plays. The one you're working on right now. What are some of your plays that you would say or you would consider great?
You just asked me, what was it again? You asked me today.
We've talked about a lot of your
Oh,
novels.
the
We
plays,
talked
yeah.
about yeah. What are your great
So the
plays?
very first play that I wrote mature-wise, back in 2017 when I was working as a janitor at a local school district here in Texas, was a play that was, and I don't remember all the names of the plays, but they were a play based upon a girl who had a babysitter who had an affair with the father. I took this very trite thing and I gave depth to it. And I would say that was a play that was on par with any of the great modernist plays like Streetcar Named Desire, Death of a Salesman, or whatnot. Both of those are flawed but great works themselves. And then I have a character called Danny Wagner, who's my doppelganger in a good deal of these plays. And I went through a lot of different permutations. I wrote a lot about the women that I knew and my
Yeah.
relationships with women. But I did them in different times. For example, I had a one night stand with this girl who was the bridesmaid in one of my brother's at my brother's wedding 27 years or so ago. And the basis was, what if this girl had gotten pregnant and never told me that I had a kid? So that was the basis of that a play I wrote there. Then I have a lot of more existential. I wrote about this John Doe character screwing this girl. I call them. I've done 2 or 4 tetramal plays, which tetra meaning 4, mal bad 4 plays about evil people that I knew. The other one was about this fat kid who wanted to rape this girl who was a cashier at a store I worked at, and I did some things to stop him. And then I started after about 40 or so plays. I did a play about some of my best plays. I have one play about being on Jones Beach on Long Island as a kid that I call Long and Long Ago. It's if you've ever seen Radio Days by Woody Allen, it's a very similar, evokes a very similar feel. Then I started doing historical plays. One of my best, more historical plays that I like. Well, what I did was I also reworked. For example, I did a 5-play series on Camelot. I call it my Camelot Quintet, where I redo the whole Arthurian mythos. Then I
Yeah.
did a 5-play cycle. Oh, I did a 3-play cycle on the Great Khans: Genghis Khan, Ogadai Khan, and Kubla Khan. So I did a trio of plays on them because I've
And these are like your historical plays.
Yeah.
You've
And
done
then I did a 5-play reworking of the Jason, the Argonauts, and Medea. And I changed things around to make it a little bit more, because a lot of the Greek myths are nonsensical. Medea is made to be the bad character, and she kills certain characters that it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense for her to kill. And then one of my favorite historical plays on a more modern sense was when I did a play on Bobby Fischer, the great chess champion. And I took a character that I had. There was a terrific actress, young actress named Chloe Lanier on General Hospital, a soap opera I watched for many years, and I've employed her doppelganger character to assume parts. And in this play, the Chloe character is playing this presumed love interest of this crazy chess champion. And so that was an interesting thing to do. And then I started doing. I don't even remember all the plays, but I mean, I've done a lot of them, and like I said, the next one, once I finish this book, I'll do a Catherine the Great. I did.
What's the book you're writing right now?
The book I'm writing right now is called The System. and it's a rework of a book, and it's not a rework, but it's about a guy who gets abducted with a number of other people by aliens. He gains power, and he decides to set about to change the world. But it's not going to be the typical dystopian thing. What's going to actually happen is that the world...
So were you going to say it's a reworking of Slaughterhouse-5?
No, my book Levels. In Levels, I did this.
Okay.
So I've had three...
That's a love story, correct?
What?
Levels is like is like a romance love story. I haven't read that one.
Well, no, it's about a guy who's pulled away, and his wife... It ends with... We don't know whether his wife is actually dead or missing or whatnot.
Okay.
It's hard to bring these things down because they have a lot of ideas. Artwork that can be reduced to just a sentence is generally not good art.
For sure. But it's something I got to try to do in the limited space I'm given.
Here's what you do.
That's one of the reasons I want to, be able to write films or
if you
whatever.
If you can, under your byline or something, say that anyone wanting to get any of Dan's works can email him at cosmoetica@gmail.com. That's how I got his work. If you say that, because I'm under no illusions that in my lifetime I'm going to make any money off this stuff. But if I can, if someone like you or someone who writes in, 10 years from now, that person gets involved in publishing or whatnot. They might, there's this Schneider guy that I read in that story by that Destin Davis or whatnot.
So is that the best way anybody who's interested in your work should get a hold of it? Is just emailing you?
Yeah, because for example, I couldn't reproduce. You can't reproduce. It's very difficult to reproduce a Norwegian in the family on textually because
if you ever do one, you should send me one. I want at least one of your books. I want to have either Tumbleweeds or the Vincetti Brothers for sure. I'd love to own one of those. That would be sweet if it ever gets published.
Well, hopefully, if this Bruce Ario documentary takes off, and if you can mention the Bruce Ario documentary, just for a line, because Alex and Joe.
Talk a little bit more about Bruce again.
What?
Tell me, you said some things about Bruce, but I forgot to write it down. So just...
Bruce Ario was a poet who was born in 1955, died in 2022. He was he suffered from addictions, mental illness. He suffered from a traumatic brain injury. He went insane. He was arrested for public nudity. And then basically he spent the last 40 years of his life as a born-again Christian, a very liberal political born-again Christian who went to serve his church. And had he not had the traumatic brain injury, I don't think he would have ended up a great poet. Because if he had lived a normal life, gotten married, had a kid, but he was so mentally ill for most of his life that he couldn't really find partners long term.
So how could that lead to you getting published or like this documentary?
Well, because Alex has this Automatic Nation website, so he's making the film. Again, it's going to be a documentary that's going to focus on the art, so it's not going to be something big that he's going to make money on. But the good thing is, hopefully, that will cause some kind. Maybe he can get it in a few minor festivals and win an award or something, and then he does another one, and that helps them because he's gonna publish the book through through Amazon. So he's gonna publish the selected poems, then Bruce's novel City Boy, and then his final poems. And there are probably a lot of lost poems. Bruce was not good. I mean, about stuff. Down here, I have Bruce's computer that was sent to me. I'm his literary executor, and hopefully Bruce, because of his mental illness, will get a foot in the door that would be harder for someone like me to do.
So, what do you do? What's your full-time job right now?
I work at a supermarket. I'm off this week, but I work at a supermarket.
Yeah. I think that's interesting to say, though, because someone who works in a supermarket has produced so much art versus, people who do art for a full-time job. their entire lives and write maybe 5, 10 novels.
And that's one of the before I talked with you, I was sending around to poetry professors about Bruce's novel, introductory email, and I sent around to 55 different poetry professors at different colleges, and I'll end up probably sending to 500 to 1,000. And you know what? At least when I started with this call with you, 5 of them came back. I'm on a sabbatical to research a book. I mean, these people don't do fucking shit. It's such a sign cure. And the thing is, it would be one thing if they were producing a Tree Grows in Brooklyn or a Moby Dick. Then you could actually argue it, but they don't have it because they're being an artist is a pat on the back for themselves. Being an artist for me is trying to help you or any other reader or experience of my art or other great art that I can talk about become a better person, become a better artist, because art has that. You can know a little bit about what the world was like 4,000 years ago, if there was a real Homer or not, by reading Homer. You can know what the fall of the Roman Empire was if you read the Gibbon book. It may not be totally accurate, but you can understand that. Art brings things together through time. Art is communication at its highest level. Think about this. Here's another point you might want to write down. Eyes and ears, hearing and sight have been around, as far as we know, for 600 to 700 million years. They evolved. Language, written language, has been around for somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 years at the most. Now do that math. 600 million
6 to 10,000.
Yeah, do that math. 600 million years divided by 6,000 years. You're talking about 10 to 100,000 times longer. So, music, the visual arts, painting, photography, film, mostly, it's easier to understand them. But what are you dealing with when you're dealing with just writing? It's squiggles on a medium, and unless you know that language, unless you know that alphabet that you're using, I can't read Cyrillic. I can't read Russian in Russian. I can't read Chinese and the variant, the 7 or 8 major Chinese languages. I can't read Vietnamese, So these little things can unlock a door. If you read the first page of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, there's a description of the smell of bread, and it's one of the most vivid descriptions of that you have in all of literature. And it's just this woman, Betty Smith, writing about her childhood and this character who's based on her. But it puts you back in there, and because smell is is often considered the scent that is the most memory based. Smell brings that more than the other senses. Right. She does the exact opposite. She writes about smell, and yet gets you like that. And that's one of the things that is so missing. People don't try that in the arts. All they want to do is, there was a famous Norman Mailer book called Advertisements for Myself. Nothing about Cosmoetica is just about me, Dan Schneider. It's not about my wife, Jessica. It's about trying to promote others to become better people, better readers, by engaging in things that they wouldn't normally engage in.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's a great thing to end it on. I think that's a great place. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you talking to me. And I hope we can stay in touch.
Yeah, well, yeah, and if you want to have more conversations like this, or we can talk. It's probably better once you send 6 months from now you send your redone screenplay or whatnot. It's better because things pop up in my mind. I was talking about the snow falling in James Joyce's The Dead, but I have what I call a convective memory. The unimportant stuff falls to the bottom, but then when I need it, I can pull it up. But I can't consciously pull it up. Something has to trigger that, and that's very good for art. It's bad for my day-to-day memory, but in art it's good because I'll be writing about something, and then all of a sudden, boom! Oh, wait a minute! There was that scene in Don Quixote when this happened, blah blah, and I'll say, oh. I can do that, but instead of Sancho Panza saying this, I'll have my character say that, which will instead of twisting it the tail that way, it'll twist it that way. And this is why I say too is stealing is very good in the art, not plagiarism, not plagiarism, which is the word for word taking or something, but you steal good ideas. You know, because you only have a limited amount of quote unquote original ideas. Anyone, even someone like me, is going to not be infinite to do that. But if I'm writing a poem and I'm particularly pissed off, I'll look up Sylvia Plath. Oh, there's an angry Sylvia Plath poem, and there's 3 words that stick out. I'm going to use those 3 words in a totally different context in my poem, but they'll give it the flavor of Plath. They'll give it the flavor of Walt Whitman. They'll give it the flavor of John Milton or whatever.
Yeah. Definitely want to stay in touch and talk about just like whatever you're working on and whatever I'm working on. I think that's fun to talk about.
Send me the link. Send me the link when you have the interview up. You know.
Oh, I will for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'll probably get it published sometime this week. Would be my guess. So should be pretty quick. Like the interview won't be that won't be near as long as this video we did. Probably like 1,000 to like 1,200 words. Is what I'll get the space for.
Just as long as you put Cosmoetica.com and mention the Bruce film, that would be the 2 most important.
And what's the name of the guy making that film again?
Alex Sheremet, 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 and Joel Parrish with 2 R's, Joel Parrish, Parrish.
So you said Sheremet.
Sheremet, Sheremet, and then Joel with an L, Joel, Joel Parrish, Parrish.
Yeah.
And it's and the film is going to be called From There to There.
Okay. When do you expect that to come out?
Alex is talking about this summer, July or August, so it's gonna be probably 4 or 5 months. He's got about 8 minutes of the film that I've been sending around as a teaser or whatnot for people to look at and maybe. But again, a lot of these YouTube channels, they're not going to be interested. People are just not interested in depth. Even if this wasn't being recorded, and even if this wasn't about art, let's say you had met me at a Barnes and Noble bookstore or something, and we just started chatting or whatever. Most people aren't going to want to chat like that because all they cared about is their narrow little focus. Their little, the blinders are like this, and all I care about is my child, my husband, my boyfriend, my job, and I care about those things too, but when I'm dead, there has to be something that's passed on. There is a value to passing things on. At work, whether it's making a bale or properly using a forklift, I try to show young kids. Most of them I have to show 7, 8 times, and even then they don't get it and they don't care. And I end up doing all the shit work because they don't want to do that. They don't want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to do this or whatnot. And having said that, all young people are like that. It's bullshit when people talk about this generation of young people being particularly bad. Every younger generation from our time has had the same stuff put on them. But it's because they are the younger generation right now that I'm talking about, these specific people. Most of the people who are my age, when they were that age, were shit workers too. I remember. I don't bullshit. It's like when I talk to people back in New York. I'll say, God damn, I was arguing with this guy on my high school's Facebook page, and I was like, my high school literally was called, there was a book called Race Riots in Franklin K. Lane High School or something like that. It was written about it was the worst high school in the 60s and 70s. 6,000 people in a high school, 6,000 students, and there were race riots. There were gang. Well, I was the only white kid in a Hispanic gang, and there was this shit all the time, and yet people they write it. Oh, it was the best time of my life. I'm like, what fucking school did you go to? Or they'll say in our neighborhood there's a meme going around. generation, my generation, we were the generation that stayed out late and did this and this. Rosie, I said, we were also the generation that didn't do anything about racism, that didn't curtail Reaganism, that looked away at the AIDS crisis, calling people fags and all this stuff. I remember the stuff. I remember when my mom sold our house in New York, so we moved to Minnesota. People threatening to burn it down if we sold it to N-words. So don't give me this bullshit. People always, with time, people always try to make things as if they weren't. It's like I'm talking about the Goodfellas stuff. I know the bullshit in Goodfellas. It's a great film, but it's made a lot of mafia bullshit stories that never happened or were just, guys yanking their dicks.
And it goes back to that Henry Hill guy. So, it's an interesting character that he's like turned himself into like this myth, and you see him on like the Howard Stern interviews. Have you ever watched any of those?
Yeah.
He's like a total like. I don't want to be mean, but he's a total joke.
Yeah. Well, for example, when I do this, Jessica gets angry if I'm just wearing a white shirt. You should dress up. I said, I'm not fucking Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
No one's gonna give a shit what I'm wearing. Unless I'm jerking myself off on screen. No one's gonna fucking.
Saying, though. The guy sounds crazy. You know what I mean? He sounds like a maniac.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that like he probably did tell. I guess he probably did tell someone he got patted on the back after.
And if you and I ever watched that movie, we're doing like a running commentary. As the scenes came up, well, there's that famous Tommy scene with Pesci where he's going, "You think what makes me funny? You think I'm funny?" What? Everyone that has happened in every scene, and anyone who's eaten out in an Italian restaurant in New York or New Jersey area has seen something like that. There was nothing unique about it. It's a great scene. Pesci does well playing this little psychotic, but Well,
what's good about it is the way he portrays the psychotic. It gets quiet in the way Leota plays off of him, and then the way they laugh and all the tension kind of like goes away. The tension just kind of goes away. That's what makes it work really well. Another filmmaker I didn't hear you say anything about. We've talked Bergman, we've talked Kurosawa, Scorsese. I didn't hear you talk about Hitchcock. What do you think are his best films?
A very good popcorn director, but he's not in a league with Kurosawa or them. I agree. The best films are those where he took chances. Rope, Strangers on a Train.
I feel like Rope's interesting.
But it's a play. It was originally a play. There's Frenzy, which came out in '71, is a more realistic portrayal of a psychopath than Psycho is.
Interesting.
It's not as good I prefer English Hitchcock in the '30s before he came to Hollywood. Rear Windows is very overrated. Vertigo being the #1 film for a decade is a joke. It's not nearly in the class. Although it's better than the shitty film that replaced it.
What about that? The Sight and Sound. I kind of want to pull that up.
Yeah. I did this about a year ago with a fellow who.
You already did this. Okay.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
What was #1? That 3.5 hour.
Gene Dealman.
Yeah, I could.
It's about a woman that basically.
That's the critics pick.
It's basic. I said it's a film that's twice as long and half as good as Roman Polanski's Repulsion. It's about a woman who basically is a murderess.
Yeah, I think. What are some films you would vote for?
What to put in the greatest?
The top 10. Yeah, that's what these.
I've always said if
the
I'm
Sight and Sound, they send directors and critics.
If I'm picking the top film, it's one of two films. It's either 2001: A Space Odyssey, just because, again, we don't know. It has these great lacunae that you can fill in yourself. But I would give a slight edge to Fellini's La Dolce Vita. It's a film.
I had that in my top as well.
It's a film that at turns is a great comedy. It has a great dance number. It's a great drama. The characters, Marcello Mastroianni is right up there in that performance with what's his face from Killing of a Chinese Bookie, Gazzara. It the loose structure is very much like Huckleberry Finn. It's comments on religion. It's comments on
the scene where the Mother Mary, where they think they see the Mother Mary. That scene's incredible.
And it's based upon the Lisbon, Portugal scene from the early 20th century. The Our Lady of Fatima, the scene where Marcello and his father there. There's something that happened between the father and Marcello, but again, we don't need to know exactly why. The scenes with the guy who ends up killing his
the professor.
Children. Yes.
Yeah.
Just brilliant. It comes out of nowhere. And then of course the end scene, with the night of debauchery, and then they walk out and they see the manta ray, and Marcello is doomed there, and he sees the little blonde girl who's the symbol of savior. She's innocent, she's fresh. He's not a pervert. He doesn't want to fuck the little girl, but he can't go be with her into a life of betterment because he's a roue, he's a rake, he's a phony. Just like I mentioned this guy in Portrait of Jason, who early on, I think I mentioned this film about this poseur who just talks for an hour and a half. Marcello is a poseur. He's a hollow man, to speak T.S. Eliot. There's nothing there inside of Marcello. No matter.
You say he's like T.S. Eliot?
Yeah, if you read the poem "The Hollow Man."
Oh, okay.
The Hollow Man.
Okay. I haven't read that. I've only read his most. I have like a short.
And I put Killing of a Chinese Bookie up there.
Like The Wasteland.
I put 4 or 5 Wells films there, along with Kubrick, I
like Strangelove a lot.
Strangelove, I was gonna say, Dr. Strangelove is up there.
I like Raging Bull.
Clockwork Orange, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, I think is the best Scorsese. Raging Bull is maybe number 2 with Goodfellas. But that, if you just had to pick 3, those are the 3 to pick. Again, there's 5 or 6 Kurosawas I put up there. There's 3 or 4 Ozus I'd put up there. A couple of Charlie Chaplins. Chaplin is the only of the big 3 comedians. He's the only one that works today.
Not a fan of Keaton.
Well, Keaton, his most famous film is The General, but all of his films are mechanistic. They are. It's a great extended scene into a film, but all of his films are mechanistic. There is no emotion. If you watch City Lights, the ending of City Lights, there you get 2 human beings seeing each other. Literally, the blind girl can finally seeing each other for the first time. The Circus is a great film by Charlie Chaplin too. If you get to work it, it's underrated. Who
made The Passion of
Joan of Arc? Yeah. That's one of Jessica's favorite films. That's a great film too. That's Carl Theodor Dreyer. But but a film that's just as good by Dreyer is Vampire. That's Aguirre, The Wrath of God by Herzog.
Oh yeah. I love Strozek.
That's a very good film, but Aguirre I think is easily the best.
As far as greatness, yes, I would agree. But it's that. To what you were saying about greatness and what you like, I would say I like Strozek more as far as a film that I'm going to rewatch and have fun with and laugh at. But Aguirre is a towering achievement as far as the craft of film.
Scenes from a Marriage and
Persona's probably my pick. My 2 picks for best film are probably Persona and La Dolce Vita. I would. Yeah.
Well, and I've said, technically speaking, and I've said this, Persona is Bergman at his height. Literally, what Bergman is doing is here, he's saying, oh, you guys with the French New Wave, you think you're going to out... He's saying, motherfucker, I'm Ingmar Bergman. Here's my dick. I'm putting it on the table. You try slicing it off. You can't because you're not Ingmar Bergman and you're not at the height of the power.
You can't cut from this angle. You can't cut from this face to this face and have this face come into the shot perfectly like I can. You can't do it.
Yeah. And it's a total dick thing, and he makes the 2 French guys. The
first 10 minutes is him just fucking
Truffaut,
flexing.
And who's the guy who did Breathless?
Godard.
Godard and Truffaut are amateurs compared to Bergman.
Oh yeah, I agree completely. And I like some Godard films, and I like the 400 Blows. I think I would consider the 400 Blows a great film. I think it's one of the great films about being a kid and just having all these people trying to
It's
tell you
better
you
than
can't do
Breathless,
things.
and I think it's an okay film, but I wouldn't. I don't think it's a great film. If you want to
Yeah.
watch, here I'm going to tell you two great films. If you want to watch great kids films, one is the follow up to the Cat People. I forget what it's called, The Return of the Cat People, or what.
Oh, no,
It's basically about a little girl who's the daughter of one of the original cat person woman, and she's dealing with her father remarrying,
mhm.
and this is supposed to be a horror film follow up to a horror film, but it's about the loneliness of a little girl. And the other great one, that's a great kids film, not a great film overall, but a great kids film, is Godzilla's Revenge. It's about a little Japanese boy who's a latchkey kid. This resonated with me deeply as a child. He
Mhm.
and but he fantasizes about Godzilla. We're not quite sure whether Godzilla is real in this film or whatnot, or is this just the Godzilla of the movies that he's watching on TV? And what happens is he ends up dealing with a couple of gangsters who are out to get him because he stumbles upon something. He's got kids who are bullying him, and then there's this really great B story where there's an old man who's the next door neighbor in the apartment building where he lives, who's just a little too friendly, who's a little too doting on the little boy. And I knew when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, whatever I was when I saw this movie with my kids, all of us 5, 6, or 7 knew that guy's a pervert. That guy wants to get into the pants of the little kid.
Right.
Ashiro is his name, I think. But no, I am the only critic that has ever picked up on this pedophilia thread in there, and that the real threat to the boy in this film about the fictional Godzilla that he fantasizes about is a possible pedophile, and and it again, it's all from that boy's point of view, just like with the Cat People sequel.
That does sound good. They do.
Now people will slag
What
on
about
Godzilla's Revenge.
Ozu's got Good Morning, the Ozu film.
Yeah.
That's got the kids. That's a good. I like that one. I think that's a good kids film.
And some other ones. And the Japanese New Wave was so much better than the French New Wave. The Insect Woman, Woman in the Dunes. A number of them whose names I forget. The Burmese Harp is another great film, Japanese film. Sancho the Bailiff is a great,
like the Lone Wolf and the Cub. Have you seen those?
No.
Those are like good samurai films. Yeah, they're fun, but they're like 70s and they're a little bit more.
By the 70s, samurai films were just entertainment.
This one, it plays on that entertainment, but also with some serious themes, which makes it fun. And yeah, I haven't watched as much of the Japanese New Wave, I guess I have, as like the 50s and the 60s, like the early 60s, 50s, and 40s. Mainly it's Ozu, Kurosawa I've seen, and the guy who did Human Condition, Harakiri, Samurai Rebellion.
And that's a good trilogy as one film. If you another one to watch, I mean, people always talk about Andrei Tarkovsky, but Bela Tar, a Hungarian filmmaker, Satan Tango is a 7.5-hour movie, but the thing is, it's got an accordion effect because it has these long scenes. A person will be walking, for example, for 7 minutes, and the camera will follow him. But in your mind compresses it. And
what's this called?
Satan Tango. It's one word. Satantango. Satan Tango. But his best film is the one with the whale's eye, the Werkmeister Harmonies. I mean, that's just a one of that I would put in a top 10 possibly, or a top 20.
There was one that was slipping my mind that I was gonna say I would have up
and
there.
Tarkovsky again has Solaris.
Three Colors trilogy. I think as a whole, that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Maybe as a whole, the greatest thing I've seen done in film. Maybe in my personal opinion, as a whole, all three films together beginning, middle, end. The white's not as strong as blue
Yeah.
and red.
White is a misfire. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good film, but it's not
Yeah.
it's not a great film like the other two.
Exactly. Yeah.
Decalogue has some good stuff, has some bad
I
stuff
thought
too.
your review of Decalogue was the best review of Decalogue I've read.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people just like kind of went back after the Three Colors trilogy and like held it as like total masterpiece. I think there's some great things in Decalogue, and I thought what you said about the episode of when the murder episode about state versus execution, state execution, where the guy murders in the car, and then he's sentenced to death. That episode of Decalogue is praised as like the best one, and in your review, you recognize it as one of the weaker ones, and I agreed. When I watched it, I was kind of underwhelmed. I feel like the first episode and some of the earlier ones, and then there's one about the guy, kind of like the Rear Window one, where he's like spying across, watching through his window, watching the woman. I thought that one was really good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who. To go back to Tarkovsky, the Ivan, not Ivan Ilyich. What's the one?
Andrei Rublev.
Andrei Rublev, Solaris, and then Mira are his three big ones. Mira is just. I have to say that's the one I picked. Mira is just. It's just a breathtaking film in terms of the mixture of memory and stuff. He never.
It's hard to take in, honestly. The mirror is so powerful. It's a little hard to take in the first time you watch it.
I actually got probably 95% of that, but I mean, yeah, it's the one of those things you could rewatch it and get something. Andrei Rublev is a film that initially I thought put as a near great film, but it's one of the few times I've changed my mind and it's gone up in my estimation because it sticks in the mind and it's a film that's very similar in terms of its progression as La Dolce Vita, except it doesn't follow just one character. Let me think. If you're talking science fiction, I mentioned 2001 Solaris. The original Alien. The original one.
Yes.
Aliens is a very good action film.
A little cheesy in moments, though.
Yeah. Terminator 2 is also a good. But then again, they ruined it. It's like, why do they have to do these They're totally bankrupt with ideas. Franchise. Oh, I will tell you one thing. If you watch, I've watched now the first 2 seasons of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. The best Star Trek since the original one, bar none.
Really?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
I had given up on Star Trek. If I'm ranking the Star Trek shows, the best one is the original one. The second best one is Strange New Worlds, although it has the potential to be better. Now, people complain because like there's a lesbian character who's a bit snarky and whatnot, and you have to a lot for the change in the real world. But then I would say Voyager. Then I would say probably The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise. And I thought Enterprise, you couldn't get worse than Enterprise as a show. But that Discovery was worse. Picard was terrible. I mean...
And my boss, my editor, loves Star Trek. I'll have to ask him if he's watching that new one. I'm sure he'll know. He loves it. That's his favorite. I think y'all are probably around the same age.
Well, if yeah, okay.
So back to Keith's, like the Three Colors trilogy. Have you seen the Double Life of Veronica?
Yes. No, Veronique.
Veronique. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and that I think might be his best single film.
Okay. Yeah, it might be.
The actress who does it, I remember when I saw that, I was like, God, I want her. I mean, the actress, I forget her name now, but it's like.
Well, the one in blue too, Juliette Binoche. I'm in love with her as well. She's like one of my favorite actors.
That's the kind of woman that before I got married, I would dream of. A babe like her who's beautiful, but not necessarily supermodel kind of gorgeous. But
great film.
Here's a film that that very few people know about, or it's a very niche film. There's a 1973, is it Hungarian, a Czechoslovakian French film called Fantastic Planet. It's animated. I would watch that. I'd be interested to see what you think of that. I wouldn't say it's a great film, but it's an interesting film that dares. It has a few things that fail that prevent it from being great, but it's ideationally it's such a unique thing.
And that one might be on Criterion. I feel like I've seen that on the Criterion.
Yeah, it probably is on Criterion. Fantastic Planet. It's only about 80 or 90 minutes. Another thing that
I'm watching High and Low tonight, so we'll go
another thing
Fantastic Planet next.
Another thing you should watch.
I need to do Santiago. Did you watch? Okay, you go ahead.
Wait a minute. I want to tell you something when I get off here. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say? I just wanted to write something before I forgot it down.
You were saying something, and I'd interrupted you, and I can't remember. I forgot what I was gonna say. So I wrote down Fantastic Planet. I was gonna ask you if you saw the Godzilla film that came out last year. It's a Japanese one.
Godzilla minus one.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
I haven't. For me, I watched Godzilla film. The last Godzilla film that I saw in the movie was '85, which was a follow-up to the original one. And then they did, other stuff. I saw the '98 Godzilla film, which I don't think was nearly as bad as people thought it was. It wasn't a good film, but it wasn't an all-time terrible film. And I'm not interested in Godzilla and King Kong. This Godzilla minus one.
Oh yeah, that was I'm not interested in.
Yeah, Godzilla minus
one. I went and saw it in theaters, and I just saw a couple good reviews, and it was playing. I went and saw it I don't know, sometime last year, and I was shocked. It had a good story, and it was it went back to the post-war roots of Godzilla, and I thought it was. I think you should check it out. I'd like to know what you think of it.
Yeah, I may.
If you grew up on Godzilla.
Yeah, it's one of those things, though. I was very disappointed with the 80s and 90s and Millennium Godzillas. Why do they have to redo so many of them, like Godzilla versus King Kong, Godzilla versus Mothra?
Yeah.
Far more interesting than the MonsterVerses. What they should do, because I think they're doing a comic book that I saw a video on where Godzilla kills Superman again. So Godzilla is one of the few characters that ever killed Superman, although I'm sure he'll be resurrected, or it's a fantasy story or something. Not that I was ever big on comic books, but and speaking of comic books, have you ever seen the Watchmen? Someone once wanted me to watch
the 2000s one or the TV show.
No, I'm talking the actual comic book. I actually have it.
No, I've never.
I actually have it here, and people have with the Bob Dylan thing has tried to say. 1 second. They've tried to say that this was one of the great novels of the 20th century. It's a fucking comic book. It's not a novel, and it's not even a particularly. I would say it's not great. I mean, it's got some moments, but it's very predictable. It's like when people talk about. I've often said people will talk about other art, and they'll say, "Oh, he's got the eye of a poet. He's got the language of a poet." People know that poetry is the highest art form because it does the most with the least. Then you get people, though, that want to take these lesser art forms, and instead of making them the best, they want to compare it with other art forms that are greater, like poetry. The greatest sonnet is always going to be better than the greatest page of a comic book because it does more with less. Mm-hmm. And for example, people then will talk about, gaming, is that an art form? It uses some art in terms of the backgrounds or whatnot, and you can talk about some storyline, but when you are able to choose all this different stuff and go in different directions, and especially if it's a game where you either win or lose, that's not art.
Yeah, I've played a lot of games. I grew up playing games, but I never like took the medium as the same way I did as like watching a movie or reading a book,
But
uh,
but but then the
or even listening
insistence.
to a song.
Why do people want to make it as if it's an art form? Can't you
I
just
don't know.
appreciate it for being a game? There's
I had a
nothing
friend
wrong with
tell me
games.
there was this game that came out called Elden Ring last year. That it's considered one of the best games ever. My friend told me his first day playing it. He said, "I think this is the greatest piece of art I've ever experienced in my life."
Yeah.
I was like, "What? You just logged in. You're looking around." Like I think Elon Musk actually said something similar. That Elden Ring was like one of the greatest pieces of art, and also he says the greatest novel ever written is
Thank
The Lord of the
God that
Rings.
Elon Musk is not an American citizen because he'd
Oh
try
my
running for
God.
president. And
Yeah.
this guy, I think is if he was ever if he could run for president, he would be even more dangerous than Trump because Trump is a total idiot and con
Yeah,
man.
he's a moron.
But
Yeah.
Musk, while he's no genius like people claim him to be,
Hmm.
is smarter than Trump and is more
Hmm.
dangerous because he has some smarts.
Yeah, no, thank God. You're right. He's not an American citizen. That guy is, you know, Twitter. Are you on Twitter at all or anything
I
like
was.
that?
I got kicked off. You want to know why I got kicked off?
Yeah,
Because remember when there was that attack at the Pittsburgh synagogue a few years ago,
yeah.
and that Ann Coulter had posted some shit
Oh
about it.
God.
Basically, she was clapping about Jews dying or whatnot, and I just up and called her a cunt on my thing. And they suspended me and took my account away. So the lesson you learn from social media is sort of like what I said about the guy who threatened me about in the legal system is that if you have enough followers and you cheer on the death of Jews
Yeah,
like a Nazi, you're safe. But if you call out, uh, uh, a Jew hating
yeah,
wannabe Nazi and call her a name, that's not good. It's like with Facebook too. I've reported, for example, when I see instances of animal abuse. Have you ever seen these animal abuse videos where they'll take a frog and a couple of scorpions and they'll see who will win? And this violates Facebook's stated thing about animal violence and whatnot. But
yeah.
because it gets a million views or something, they don't
Uh,
care.
It's and so it's just the thing. There's so much shit content, and I would love to do. We ran some time, and I gotta eat dinner at some point tonight.
Yeah.
But I would love to do. We're getting on this topic, just the destructive nature of social media. Just have a
Oh,
conversation about that because I think it's one of the most destructive things happening. What it does to people's brains. I mean, you got people like Jordan Peterson that people watch and get their opinions from, and they think
yeah.
this guy is smart and intelligent.
Well, Alex Sherman on his
Informing the way
website
they view the world.
Automachination, we ripped into Jordan Peterson. We
That's,
ripped into
yeah,
this guy named Christopher Langan, who claims to be the smartest guy in America. I mean,
oh
they're
my
both
God.
idiots.
Yeah.
But social media is terrible because there used to be a saying before the internet that the wisdom of the common man. Well, the internet has totally proven that wrong.
Yeah.
The common man is a boob.
Yeah.
He's an
Yeah, he
idiot.
is. He's a moron. And that's another thing that a battle at the newspaper is, we write stories and do research and get sources and we write like journalists. But there's like these other websites around where we live that are just like social media, clickbaity websites that, are somehow now our competitors. But they don't
Yeah,
have anybody who's like a journalist. They just copy and paste a press release onto their website and
yeah.
claim they're a news site.
And the thing is, there's so much in modern society that's wrong. Like I don't like idiots who don't know anything. But but
Neither
the
do
thing the
I.
thing but the thing is, if you look at science and for example, I'm not religious, but I didn't like those four horsemen of atheists. That Daniel Dennett. I once interviewed him. I wasn't impressed with him. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, Dawkins comes
Well,
off as
guys
an
who make
asshole
that
at
their
times.
whole thing.
Christopher
Mhm.
Hitchens was a total ass. He made millions off of the Iraq War with
Yeah.
his reporting and stuff there. And then the other guy, Sam, what's his name? Sam,
I don't know.
supposed philosopher guy. Sam Harris. He's terrible too. He's a raging bigot, and it's like these guys.
Anybody who gets famous off of being an atheist, that's enough.
The only thing you need to be an atheist is I don't believe that there's a God. That's it. There's no other requirements for being an atheist.
These guys are just grifters.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. And when you, they to me in a way are almost as bad as the televangelist types.
Oh my gosh, those are. I mean, there's a funny show on HBO, a satire about them, the Righteous Gemstones. It's got a couple good episodes with John Goodman that make fun of the televangelists. And they move in the church to a Sears in one of the episodes, and he says, "This used to be a Sears where you could get a couch, but now you can buy Jesus. Can I get an amen?" And they go, "But you can't put him on layaway." It's fucking good. Well. I got to wrap it up. I really appreciate you talking to me today, Dan. We'll have to stay in touch for sure.
All right. And, just let me know when it's up. I'll put this up either later today or tomorrow.
What channel?
On my Cosmoetica.
Because you got two, E-Cosmoetica and...
What I'll do is I put this on the Cosmoetica, and then a month or two from now I'll break it up into 7 or 8 sections and put it on E-Cosmoetica. But
sounds good. I'll try to get the story out this week, and I'll let you know.
All right, thank you. Goodbye.
Appreciate you.